Ex-teachers or professors? What made you ditch your career? A female student I had disciplinary issues with accused me of hitting on her and making obscene gestures towards her. I'm an openly gay man, and most of the staff knew this, yet the district still put me on suspension while they investigated. They were able to prove she was lying, but the district decided that the best course of action was to transfer me to another school instead of, punishing the student. I quit at the end of the school year and got a job in banking. A student had a mental breakdown in the library, smashed a wooden chair, and gouged a pencil in his arm while screaming that he wanted us to all go away, and I got reamed out for not calling campus security before I called 911. And yes, depending on your school, there might be many good points about why on-site security should be called first. Honestly, everyone should check with their institution and find out the protocols, but let your ethical and moral code guide you too. Please skip ahead if you have issues with violent events. Frankly, I'm glad I called 911 first, or this story would have had a really bad ending. When the student gouged his arm, he must have hit something because blood started pulsing out of his arm. He inflated. I don't know how else to explain it. He turned purple and screamed even louder. He took a step towards another student, looked at his arm again, fainted, smashed his face into the corner of the table, and just started convulsing. The 911 dispatcher talked us through what we needed to do until the EMTs got there. The student did survive. Nobody else was physically hurt. He sent a thank you card after he got out of the treatment program. On calling security first, I was never informed of that policy. None of the other staff or faculty who were trying to get the other students out or hidden in a staff room knew about the policy either. Others called 911 as well. The person who screamed at me for not following the chain of command was the person who was supposed to train all faculty and staff in the policy. They didn't do that. The school did have a history of not reporting vandalism, car break-ins, and thefts to local law enforcement. I don't think that came into play with this event. I still second-guess myself about those events, but sometimes you can only do the best with what's in front of you. I had a student that copied off another kid during a test. I gave him a 0%. The parents came in to complain to administration that since I hadn't explicitly said during the first day of orientation that cheating wasn't allowed, it was an unfair punishment. Administration forced me to allow him an opportunity to retake the test. He never retook it, and the grade of 0 still stood. Still, I was so disillusioned by the entire experience that I started looking the next day at college programs that I could use to transition away from public education. Yeah, the more I hear about the administration of schools, the more I don't like it. Talk about a group of people hogging a disproportionate amount of resources for their own salaries, while they cut literally everything else the school actually needs to function down to the bone. I'm sure not all administrators are bad and do care about the educational experience of their kids, but there is definitely a misallocation of funds and focus going on at that level. 2 weeks into my first year teaching 9th grade math, I had a girl attack another girl for no reason in my class. She was grabbing onto her hair really tightly and I was trying to break it up. Another student tried to help me out, and somehow the instigating student managed to punch him in the face and give him a bloody nose, while still holding onto the other student's hair. Now, what makes this story relevant is I literally said the uncensored words, "F this," while trying to break up a fight. Not loud, not to a student, but just like, "F this, I'm not going to let this happen in my class right now." Well, the instigating student decided to tell the principal that I was cursing at her. Despite the other students in my class supporting me and the fact that this student had a history of violence, I got a letter in my permanent file saying that I'd used inappropriate language towards a student. Let me just say, F that. Teaching taught me a lot, but I couldn't do it for more than a couple of years. Really respect those that persevere and make it their career. When the principal told me one of my students' mother was getting her secondary education certification so she could move up to teach high school math where her son was, so they wouldn't be renewing my contract to teach the following year. But they were in need of a network administrator for the school district, and they were willing to pay me a teacher's $25,000 salary to do it, and I'd be answering to each building principal like a janitor, not to the superintendent like a district-level admin. The principal's niece made a B in my freshman geography class, and the teacher wanted me to bump it up to an A. Because the child couldn't get into Texas A&M with a B in freshman class on her record. This school also pressured teachers to fail no students. End of year, assessing students to see who had progressed through to the second year. While assessing the work, the department head came in and said we had to fail X amount due to facilities and resources for the next year. He then returned an hour later and said that due to the budget, we actually needed to pass a higher number than originally thought. I completely ignored what it said and carried on marking on merit, but it was the proverbial straw. This was a UK university a few years ago. The system has been really messed up in recent years, let me tell you. When admin wouldn't let me take more than 4 days off after a close friend died unexpectedly. "You're letting the kids down" is a phrase I heard over and over again as I tried to reason with them. Parents yelling at me for accusing their little prince of acting out and getting zero support from administration. I think John Mulaney had a great joke about that. "One thing that's changed since I was growing up is parents believing their children over adults and teachers. My parents would literally believe any adult over me. A homeless man could drag me to my house and tell my mom, 'Your son just bit me on the crotch.' And my mom would say, 'Jonathan, why did you bite this nice man's crotch?' Meanwhile, I'd be standing there like, doesn't anyone want to know why I bit his crotch? Doesn't anyone care about why his crotch was so close to my chompers?" I failed a college student who never came to class and missed both the midterm and final exams. The influential parents complained to the school. The administration later went into the digital records and changed the fail to a passing grade without my knowledge. I found out later, third hand. Ergo, I refused to sign a second-year contract that they offered me. I caught a student cheating, but stupid cheating. He cheated off someone else with the wrong answers and the same wrong spelling. When I spoke to him regarding taking a new test, which was generous on my part considering it should have been a 0 per school policy, he refused and said I'd be hearing from his parents. I, of course, did hear from them via my principal within an hour. Gotta love kids and their phones readily available. Fast forward to meeting with the student, parents, and principal, I had his test and the one from which he cheated. Upon showing this to the parents, I fully expected them to understand and hold their son accountable. No. Instead, the parents demanded an apology from me for branding their son a cheater, which would negatively impact him for the rest of his life. And also, it's the least I could do since they were, quote, paying my salary. When I said I wouldn't apologize for catching their son cheating, the father said I was lucky I was a woman because otherwise he'd punch me in the face. Nice. So yeah, good times. Glad I got my master's for that. Admin ended the meeting at that moment. It shouldn't have gotten that far. I can't remember, this was over 10 years ago, the student was taken out of my class. So everybody wins. New admin these days, they're actually super supportive of everyone. They hold teachers, parents, students, custodians, cafeteria workers, and everyone in between responsible. Parents still get a little crazy, but as a staff we feel very much supported. Also, for the record, I do love my job. It comes with its insane stories like they all do, right? When the prestigious high school I was working at focused on sports more than academics. On top of that, it turned out that the principal overrode teachers' marks if they tried giving students a failing grade. F that. My mum retired as a special education teacher after a student bit her hard enough to draw blood. She had to get a ton of tests for everything from hepatitis to frickin' rabies. She was fine, thankfully, but that was when she decided she had had enough. She went on to sub for non-special ed kids and eventually to do administrative work at a charity for ASD individuals. A kid poured gasoline under the door of my room after hours, and they lit it, burning most of the room. The facility guys worked all weekend to clean it up and paint it, hauling in new desks to replace those burned. Not long after that, I found out I could make more money with less hassle by waiting tables at the beach. Plus, the beach has women in bikinis. I was gone a week later. I was about to call this person a bit of a lechy creep, but I guess the primary motivation was indeed the money and the lack of death by fire. Plus, he or she didn't specifically say that they were just standing there ogling women, only that those women happened to be there and were a positive aspect. Who doesn't like hot people in beachwear, I suppose? You get a tentative pass, drooling beach waiter. I was teaching middle school English while overseas in Europe when two students, a boy and a girl, began viciously fighting after the boy made comments about the girl's mother. For most people, this would be easy to break up, but as a 5'5" manlet, both the 13-year-old kids had several inches and pounds on me. When I positioned myself in between them, they took a break from fighting each other to work as a team to push me over a desk. They then promptly resumed punching each other's lights out. I quit that week. In case anyone's interested, the fight ended abruptly when the girl gave the boy a nosebleed and he finally let go of her ponytail. I was substituting at a low-income middle school for the day, about 40 students per class. Just had a simple worksheet for them to work on every hour rotation. Spent the day breaking up fistfights, with chairs or desks being thrown across the room, students having screaming matches, students climbing and dancing on their desks, students just leaving class during the chaos. I had 6 students turn in the completed worksheet for an entire day of class rotations. I realized I was no longer a teacher, but a prison guard with fewer benefits and no way to defend myself. I guarantee 80% of those kids will end up dead or in prison before the age of 25. Never again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was a high school teacher with 7 years experience in my district and a master's degree. I was making $49K. This was in 2013. I was talking to a friend who was in from out of town. This friend had barely made it through his bachelor's degree, even with a lot of help from me and other friends. Over dinner, he was complaining about not getting a good enough raise, so he was only making $143K at his software consulting job. He didn't do the technical stuff, more customer relations. So I left teaching to make more money. I am now, but it's taken me a while and I really miss working with the kids. I wish I'd stayed in teaching, to be honest. I was invited to apply for another job. There's this feeling among professors that though our jobs feel insufferably exhausting and stressful sometimes, that it's just the best possible job anyone could have and we should be nothing but thankful that we have them. I guess that's what keeps us going through all the bullcrap. Recently, someone invited me to apply for a directorship at another institution, meaning I'd move up several ranks and direct a research program and facility. When I was being told about the job, I was like, so let me get this straight. I never have to teach again, all of my research will be done with and by a large team of enthusiastic, well-paid, trained professionals rather than itinerant, underpaid grad students and postdocs that I have to recruit and train every year. I never have to write another grant and you'll pay me twice as much as I make now? This completely broke the spell. I realized that being a professor, on balance, is actually a horrible job in a lot of ways. I think it's just so hard to get a job in academia that we brainwash ourselves that it's the best thing ever to go through this whole long, humiliating process. We know about these other jobs, but the buzz is that you're paid well and highly respected, but in turn you sell your intellectual soul, so you should never want them. But it's just not true. There are some great jobs out there where you can still be a scholar, an even more productive and effective one in many cases, and not have to deal with the other crap. A lot of people will be hearing this and think I hate teaching, which I guess is understandable. But I don't. I love it, and I think most professors do. What I don't love is having to work to run a research program. Recruitment, mentoring, grant writing, fund management, personnel management, manuscript preparation, manuscript reviews, and of course, actual research. I get to do this along with the work of designing and teaching courses. Teaching is not just time-consuming, it can be very taxing on your mental energies as well. What I didn't like about it was having to do 2 full-time jobs at the same time. So if I can only do one, that's super. I'm getting a lot of requests for career advice concerning going into academia, and here's one of my responses below, that I think applies to what many people may want to know. If you want to go into academia, I say go for it. Don't drink the Kool-Aid about how being a professor is the chosen glory path, or the other Kool-Aid about how it's all a miserable rat race. A lot of how your academic career goes is how you will define it. If you love teaching, you can find yourself at an institution that emphasizes that. Conversely, if you prefer research, go to one that leans that way. If you hate writing grants, you'll find less expensive research to do. There are many ways to have an academic career. Go in with your eyes open and ready to form your career as you need it to go. The only rule, I think, is that you do have to work very hard to succeed. But the good news is that hard work pays off much more regularly than in other instances, I find anyway. And by hard work, I don't mean just effort, I mean results. But if you get the results, even if they aren't something huge and earth-shattering, doors will open for you. At some point, you may decide that you don't love what you do enough to justify all that hard work. This is understandable, and then you can look for a new path. During my student teaching, I was at a parent-teacher conference. I was speaking to a parent whose son was failing, mostly because he did none of his homework. She was angry with me and pretty much told me it was my fault. She asked me why I wasn't making sure he did his homework. I said, it's homework, meaning work you do at home. It's your responsibility to help him and make sure he does it. She complained about me to the teacher I was student teaching for. He warned me that teaching is very political and that teachers can keep you from getting tenure or get you fired. Other teachers told me that this was the climate nowadays. Children are not held accountable and parents blame you for their lack of parenting skills. I decided that it wasn't worth it to finish the teaching program, so I finished early with a degree in history and poli-sci, the subjects I would have taught, history and social studies in the schools. My degree is pretty much useless, but I still make more than a teacher does. I think the conversation about where the burden of responsibility for kids' behavior and work ethic goes is quite a lively and complicated one. But I do think that I generally agree with the Northern European model, where quite often you see parents are at least partially held accountable for their kids' homework and behavior. Of course, there's nuance, but I think it's preferable to hardworking educators being punished for things outside of their control. I work and teach in higher education. I still teach online and had a student a few semesters ago who did hardly any work but asked for an exemption from all the work she didn't do. I had to reply and confirm she was asking to just get a passing grade for doing no work because I thought I was just reading it wrong. There's an amazing amount of student entitlement that I didn't see 10 years ago, sort of like, I pay for a passing grade in this course, instead of, I pay for access to college-level content. I think all the really great free resources online have changed the way they look at learning, and we haven't kept up. A bit off topic, but I've recently been spending time at my kid's elementary school setting him up with an IEP. Just working with the staff and watching how fast-paced it is really surprised me. I'd be in a meeting and suddenly a walkie-talkie would go off and they'd have to go out and handle a student issue and then come back to me, and that switching gears process is non-stop. And this might just be because I live in a relatively small town, but it seems like every teacher and staff member knows every kid's name and really seems to care. After spending years working with doctors trying to help my kid, it's the people at his school who dramatically changed his and our life in just a few months. I know I couldn't do the work they do, and will be forever indebted to them for their intervention. I was a substitute teacher working on becoming a real teacher. I was a regular sub of this class of second grade kids, maybe first. I'm not really sure how to put what I have to say into words, but basically, I couldn't watch good kids get ruined by their parents. There were 4 or 5 kids I can think of, but I only remember 2 of their names, Isaac and Felix. Both of them were constantly in trouble. Felix because he didn't pay attention and drifted from one thing to the next, almost certainly an intellectual or learning disability at play, and Isaac because he was constantly acting out for attention. Now, did I have to get on these kids 50 times over the same crap? Yes. Did they kind of drive me crazy? Hell yes. But they were good kids. Felix was the sweetest little boy. He distracted all of the kids around him, but he distracted them by being nice to them. He'd just start chatting with them and seeing how they were and stuff. It was actually really endearing, but not helpful when little Billy is supposed to be doing his math and not talking. Isaac was less pleasant, but he was a smart kid. He did really stupid stuff because it made the other kids laugh. He was a decent guy, and if I stopped him, took him aside and said, "Look, you know you can't act like this, what's your deal?" He'd be like, "I don't know. Listen, I know you can be good and behave well. I've seen you do it. How about you behave yourself for me today so I can tell your teacher how good you've been?" And he'd brighten up and look happy, and for a few hours he'd be as well behaved as I could ask for. Eventually he'd do some new stupid thing and I'd give him a look and he'd kind of grin bashfully and stop. But every time I saw these kids I had to start from scratch again. Their mothers were substance addicts, and I don't know if they had fathers in the picture at all. Frickin' Felix. We were supposed to wait with the kids until their parents came and got them. On multiple occasions, Felix's mother was hours late. Hours. These kids get out at 2 p.m. and I'm there until 5 p.m. waiting for this lady, who rolls up, in pajamas with her hair crazy and no makeup on. What have you been doing all day besides not taking care of your kid? Isaac at least, his mum came and got him on time, but as soon as she was with him, she'd nitpick and peck at him about everything. "Why are you smiling like that?" "No reason." "Well, stop making stupid faces." "What the frick, lady? No wonder your kid acts like a terror in class." Over the course of the year, I watched both of them get worse and worse. I really couldn't do anything about it. I talked about them with the teacher. She felt the same way. She had made some formal complaints about the parents, but nothing came of it. After that, I just couldn't do it. I work in higher education now in a non-teaching position. I still watch people fail without being able to help sometimes, but I can help them more directly now than I could have before. I couldn't watch that happen year after year with a new batch of kids each time. F that, it makes my heart ache. I caught a kid selling substances in the hallway and I turned him in. He threatened to kill me with an ice pick. He was super unstable and volatile and had a criminal record, so I didn't doubt that he might try it. The principal refused to remove him from my class because he has the right to have an education. My other students took it upon themselves to escort me through the school in between classes and walk me to my car after school in a big huddle so that Ice Pick Boy couldn't get to me. F that. A lot of people asked why I didn't contact the police. I actually did. We had a PD stationed in the school. But nothing happened because the kid's mum was a cop as well and she pulled strings to have the whole thing quashed. I didn't file a union grievance because it was almost the end of the school year, and that crap takes time. I just decided to quit and move far, far away instead. Also, to everyone telling me I shouldn't have ratted on the kid and snitches get stitches, I get it, you're edgy, but it was literally my job to help these kids become functioning adults, and selling illegal stuff in front of your teacher is definitely an indication that you're heading down the wrong path. I actually could have lost my job if I didn't report him, so no regrets. For me, it was the time I was breaking up a fight between a 12-year-old boy and girl, and the boy turned around and punched me in the groin as hard as he could. The school administrators did nothing, his mum was in the room with him, she did nothing. The general feeling was, this kid's mum pays tuition, so deal with it. I dealt with it by leaving the school, opening my own private school, and taking half the students with me. Early in my career, I had students who were plagiarizing lab reports. I turned them in, mostly because I felt I had to. The school made a huge frickin' deal about cheating and had an academic honesty pledge statement students wrote on every test. One set of parents screamed at me over the phone. Next thing I knew, I had a meeting with the vice principal who said they didn't want the cheating to interfere with the students' future, and he ripped up all the plagiarism reports I wrote that year. My second time saying F this was based on the cumulative effects of being unsupported by the school. They changed which courses I was teaching and the grade level. We had a construction project going on, so there was constant noise, including beeping and drilling, even when they promised it wouldn't be during the school day. That was a lie. Stupid school-wide initiatives. More pointless meetings, incompetent higher-ups. It's the adults in the system that make it hard to be a teacher. The kids are generally not the problem. What's the greatest... Fine, I'll do it myself. In history. Canadian soldier Leo Major and his friend Willie Arsenault were scouting a Dutch town called Zwolle that had been captured by Germans in World War II. On this scouting trip, the two had decided to liberate Zwolle together, but were spotted and Arsenault was brought down. Major, enraged, killed 2 German soldiers while the rest fled. On the outskirts of the town, Major intercepted a vehicle, disarming the soldiers there. He told a French-speaking German soldier that all the Canadian artillery would be firing on the town in the morning, and left him free to spread the rumor, even returning his weapon as a total alpha move. That night, Major decided to single-handedly liberate the town. Arming himself with many weapons, he made explosions and noise, making it sound like the entire Canadian army was there. Several times that night, Major went back and forth from Zwolle to the Canadian base, taking 8 to 10 German prisoners each time. At one point, Major located the enemy headquarters and raided it himself. He killed several officers and the rest fled. By morning, Major discovered that the Germans who had taken Zwolle had entirely retreated. I should also mention that Major was a sniper who only had one eye from a phosphorus grenade explosion years prior, and had remained in the military because he insisted he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, and that to him, he looked like a pirate. The Dutch town of Zwolle was liberated by a one-eyed sniper. He has several other legendary acts, but this to me was the best. Damn, I just did some more reading on this guy. He was also in the Normandy invasion on D-Day, and single-handedly captured an entire German vehicle that contained communication equipment and codes. After he lost his eye, but before this incident, this motherfricker single-handedly captured 100 German soldiers. He started with one, killed the soldier's friend, then used his prisoner to force that commanding officer to surrender. As he was leading a group of prisoners back to the Canadian front lines, the enemy spotted him and opened fire. Major gave 0 Fs and continued on his merry way, dropped the first group off, ordered a tank to go and kill his pursuers, then after they got killed, he personally marched the rest of his nearly 100 prisoners back to camp. Why? He was frozen and wet when he saw the first 2 soldiers and wanted them to pay. A general tried to give him the Distinguished Conduct Medal for this, and Major refused because said general was incompetent and in no position to be giving medals. Shortly after, he survived a landmine, and guys, this was still before Zwolle. As if his massive balls weren't big enough already, after World War II he returned to fight in the Korean War and received another Distinguished Conduct Medal. While the Canadian forces were trying to capture a hill that the Chinese were currently defending, Major led 18 men as an elite sniper and scout force to a hill in the middle of the Chinese forces and opened fire. His team were able to take the hill. A couple of hours later, 14,000 Chinese reinforcements returned to take back the hill. Major refused, found cover for his men, and was able to hold back the Chinese throughout the night. I vote Major for baddest Canadian by a landslide. Folks, I understand this might be internet heresy, but is Major more of a real-life baddie than fictional Chuck Norris? Because I know that Chuck Norris can push planet Earth down while training, but he didn't do any of this stuff. Let's not forget that Isaac Newton ran out of math to work with and was like, I guess I'll just invent calculus then. He was self-quarantined during the plague as well. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst-case scenarios. The safety locking mechanism kicked in and the elevator stopped after only a few inches. He survived. Had it failed there at the New York's World Fair, we probably wouldn't have elevators today. In 1888, Almon Brown Strauger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strauger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strauger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so teed off that you don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely. Cliff Stoll, of the Cuckoo's Egg fame, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. John Snow. Not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. He was also a pioneer when it came to anesthetics. Queen Victoria permitted him to put her under for the birth of her 2 children. I visited his memorial in Brompton Cemetery a few years ago. He's right around the corner from Emmeline Pankhurst's grave. Both sites had fresh flowers on them. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s, he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out, and he started the 4th in the early to mid-1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later, the 4th volume had still not been completed. But as a consolation prize, we got TEX, later extended to the more commonly used LATEX, without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements. It's a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It's completely free and has been for well over 30 years, and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly for its size and scope, there's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in TEX or LATEX. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It's used across nearly all STEM fields, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LATX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. Probably the time that Nando Parrado and Robert Canessa decided that they couldn't wait any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food, except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They literally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. There's a book written about it by one of the survivors himself. Miracle in the Andes, 72 Days on the Mountain, and My Long Trek Home by Nando Parrado. I never watched the movie, but the book still gets me to this day. It's one of the most disturbing depictions of humans' ability to survive even under the deadliest circumstances. A really humbling read, reminding most of us of our own fragility and how terrible and fleeting everything truly is. It's gotta be Imo Koivunen. He was a Finnish soldier in the Second World War when the Finns were trying to reclaim land from the Soviets. He got separated from his unit mid-war in the middle of nowhere. He was the one tasked to carry the narcotics they held in case of injury or tiredness, one of which was Pervitin, which was basically crystal in tablet form. Instead of just taking 1 or 2, he downed the whole bottle and went on a weeks-long juiced-up rampage. He got hit by a landmine, evaded Soviet soldiers, caught a bird and ate it raw, all while on skis. He finally made it back to Finnish lines where, on arrival, he weighed only 90 pounds or so and had a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. He ended up living for another 45 years. There is one thing the rest of Northern Europe has learned: you do not mess with the Finns. Yes, they have a funny-sounding language. Those people beat tanks. On skis. Stay the frick out of Finland. Brian Acton interviewed at Facebook and got turned down. He said F it and built WhatsApp. Several years later, Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion. Maurice Hilleman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. The guy who started FedEx wrote a college paper about a nationwide overnight shipping company and got a C. Started the company anyway. Later, after he started it and it was struggling, he couldn't get a loan and the company was almost bankrupt, and he bet next week's payroll at the casino on roulette and won. Also got a Silver Star in the Vietnam War and now co-owns the Washington Redskins. The latter often viewed as the biggest failure in his life. The giant Norse axeman who held the choke point at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. By the time the bulk of the English army had arrived, the Vikings on the west side were either slain or fleeing across the bridge. The English advance was then delayed by the need to pass through the choke point presented by the bridge itself. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has it that a single giant Norse axeman, possibly armed with a Dane axe, blocked the narrow crossing and single-handedly held up the entire English army. The story is that this axeman cut down 40 Englishmen and was defeated only when a single English soldier floated under the bridge in a half-barrel and thrust his spear through the planks, mortally wounding the axeman. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which granted he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of blood shed. At least until Peter turned up dead sometime later under shady circumstances, but honestly, for a military coup, it was pretty non-violent. If saying, F it, I'm ruling Russia myself, isn't great, I don't know what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. It's incredible, especially considering A, she's a lady, and B, she wasn't Russian. C, she originally wasn't Russian Orthodox. Not a very old story. Manji, or the Mountain Man, lived in a very remote village of India, whose route to nearby was blocked by a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time, and they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried to persuade the government to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to no avail. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10+ years and finally succeeded. There's a Bollywood movie on him too, title Manji, the Mountain Man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Desmond Doss, single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said, nah, stayed up on the ridge alone and unarmed and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. And yes, I'm aware there's a movie, I've read about him before that, and I know he's done more than just what's in the movie. I just didn't want to make a 3,000-word post about the many ways this guy is amazing. Australian stretcher bearer Leslie Allen did a similar thing on Mount Tambu. Carried out 12 men one at a time on his back alone. Received a Silver Star. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for craps and giggles, he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made of from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s that we got a confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph back in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. and then he sailed the boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Thor Heyerdahl was a bit of a madman. He also tried to prove that the ancient Egyptians could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean by rebuilding one of their boats and, well, sailing across. It took 2 tries, but they did it. It's still pretty unlikely that the Egyptians actually did sail across the Atlantic, but it's neat to know that they could have. Yes, and it's important to note that the prevailing theory is that even though Americans could have settled the Pacific Islands, it's more overwhelmingly likely that it was people from Asia. So, amazing feats of strength and endurance, Thor. Very impressive on both counts. You're still probably wrong though, mate. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during World War II. Initially, he approached the British and American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Third Reich, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information, like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence and was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Germany. The Germans never realized that he was a double agent. Yes, in the lead-up to Overlord, he confirmed reports that the Allied attack would come from Dover and wouldn't attack Normandy. Then, at the last moment, he confirmed that the Allies in fact would attack Normandy. But it was too late for the Germans to act on it. So afterwards, the Germans still trusted him, as they would point to him and say, he was the only one who predicted the Normandy invasion. It was technical issues, as always, that meant that the data got to us late. How about the doctor stationed in Antarctica that removed his own appendix? Gosh darn. When Nintendo turned down a collaboration with Sony, then Sony said, "Frick it, we'll do it ourselves." And the rest is history. To be fair, I think it's great that they did. Nintendo and Sony are so different, and there's plenty of room for both. Nintendo occupies a niche that I don't think they'll ever lose. Sony and Microsoft are locked in a never-ending war, yet Nintendo will always have their niche. Doesn't matter who wins the console war, Nintendo will claim second place. The first thing that comes to thought here is the Louisiana Purchase. Congress planned on buying a small piece of the available land, but Jefferson used some interpretation messery to double the size of the US without congressional approval. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and fricking march into Rome to declare himself the military leader. Or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said that the Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically crapped themselves. Imagine being in some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, craps in your land, and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England so that he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could get rid of his wife. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He thought that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable, so he brought his own complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying that a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a good sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded, of course, and made it back safely. After the revolution, he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. The guy in the war with wounded fingers, a doctor wouldn't amputate them, so he bit them off himself. My great-grandpa did the opposite. They were going to amputate his feet in World War II, and he said, nah. So he went AWOL and treated his own wounded feet on his own. When he came back with 2 perfectly good feet, he basically said, I wanted to keep my feet and I wanted to keep fighting. And as far as I know, he didn't get any kind of punishment, even though he was gone for weeks. I imagine they would have sent him back home if they'd amputated his feet, so hard to call him a deserter for running off, especially if he came back to fight. Leonid Rogozov removing his own appendix, or Inez Ramirez Perez for doing her own C-section. Rogozov was a good doctor, and Perez was a poor Mexican woman. The guy who made body armor and shot himself to test it. I mean, I had to use a test dummy for the first few times myself. Judging by the guy's decisions, I would call him a test dummy. Metallica fired Dave Mustaine in 1983 because he was sort of a control freak and wanted to take the band in a more prog or jazz metal direction. He was also way overdoing it with substances and was known for violent behavior at the time. He went off and created his own band Megadeth, and over the next 30+ years he'd sold millions of albums and toured the whole world writing and controlling pretty much everything he had ever wanted. It seems they've now patched all the things up. The guy's an absolute genius and beast of a guitarist and songwriter. Even as a guy who knows nothing about the heavier music, that is amazing. The author has a runner-up story attached to the coattails of this absolute legend. Also, when guitarist Hillel Slovak died in 1988, John Frusciante was a 19-year-old kid and a huge fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was heartbroken and didn't want to see the end of his favorite band, so he went and auditioned to play the lead guitar. He got the gig, helped take them to the top of the charts. The rest is history, and today he's considered one of the greatest rock guitarists out there. Martine Rothblatt, founder of SiriusXM and an unbelievable polymath, was told her daughter Genesis had 3 months to live. She had been diagnosed with a type of pulmonary arterial hypertension which was fatal. The disease causes too much pressure in the blood vessels leading from the heart to the lungs, causing them to narrow and not carry enough oxygen. So Rothblatt quit all of her other work and went to the library to save her daughter. Even though she had zero background in the field, she figured out a cure and in the process founded United Therapeutics, which is a billion-dollar biotechnology company. Rothblatt's life story is amazing. Marie Curie, a Polish and French chemist and a physicist who, without going into great detail, died of constant exposure to radiation while seeking a cure for others, more or less sacrificing herself as a human guinea pig, knowing full well the consequences of her actions. Here in Scotland, we have many Marie Curie charity shops who provide funds for hospices and the like. I'm pretty sure she's responsible for saving my butt and many countless others for her pioneering works. Was quoted in 1912 as saying, "F it, I'll do it myself." Possibly paraphrased. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there wasn't really a point in striking and it would be too hard, just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage and shouts at the crowd, "I have listened to all the speeches and I have no further patience for talk. I too have worked and suffered and I am tired of talk. I move that we go on general strike, now." And everyone went for it, instant agreement from the workers. The Soviet woman who lost her husband in World War II to the Germans, who sold everything to pay for a tank with the request that she got to drive it to fight them. Go and read up about Maria Oktyabrskaya on Wikipedia. Sir Ranulph Fiennes, after an expedition, I think to the Arctic, had frostbitten digits on one hand. After becoming irritated and uncomfortable waiting for the doctors to sort out treatment, he went to his garden shed and amputated them himself. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of an African warlord because nobody else would. The kicker is that he's using all of his earnings from shilling Nespresso to do it. Also, I thought he was buying time on it and didn't outright purchase the satellite. Here's a notable mention, albeit somewhat obscure. Sam Regenstrife once made 40% of the dishwashers in the USA at the time. He fell ill with a kidney stone and went to his local hospital in Indiana. Upon leaving, he was disgusted by the waiting times and quality of care. He took matters into his own hands and created a hospital and founded the Regenstrife Institute. This institute helped map the genome of COVID-19 and translated its findings into 20+ languages, helping the world fight this virus. Henry Ford proposed to buy Ferrari so that Ford could be competitive in the performance car market. The deal was about to be signed, but Enzo only wanted to sell the commercial Ferrari division and not the racing arm. So Henry Ford said F it, and thus was born the Ford GT40. Enzo is pretty much the reason 2 other sports car companies exist. Leroy Jenkins! Oh my god, he just ran in. Stick to the plan. God damn it, Leroy! What's the most WTF thing you've seen go down in front of you? I was a kid, say around 7 maybe. My father and I were at the bank and he goes inside to do something and I stayed in the car. The driver's side door opens and this guy just gets in the car and looks down at the key. He finally turns and notices me, smiles and says, "Oh, sorry, wrong car." I then see him get into a completely different style and color car a few spaces down and drive away. As a kid, that scared the ever-loving crap out of me. Growing up, I worked on a passenger ferry to a town beach. One day we were on a layover between boats, sitting on the dock, eating lunch. It's quiet and there were ducks swimming by, really nice sunny day. All of a sudden, a swan swoops in from gosh knows where and literally lands on top of one of the ducks, forcing it under the water. The swan is literally sitting on this duck as the duck struggles to get free. After a while, the struggling stops. The duck the swan landed on does not come back up to the surface. In conclusion, I watched a swan drown a duck in cold blood. 2 heavily pregnant women fighting. Like seriously fighting. I'm talking fists, kicks, scratching, hair pulling. Everyone wanted to break it up, but nobody wanted to get in the middle of it. Maybe the babies inside of them were enemies in the past life, and decided to continue their battle using their new mothers as flesh mecha Gundams. Driving home from work one night on the freeway, I look out of my window to see a yellow motorcycle zip past me, on its side trailing sparks. The driver had fallen off and was rolling past my car. As I watch him thinking, oh crap, he fell off, I hope he's okay, a black 4-door sedan rolls right over the top of the guy. And that was the first time I ever had to call 911. One day at college during the spring semester, birds started falling out of the trees. Most couldn't fly, some were dead and others were unconscious and kind of twitchy. Really freaked everyone out. Biology department investigated, and they determined that a series of flash freezes kick-started the fermentation process of the new spring berries on the trees, and the birds were getting completely wasted. All I can say is, lucky birds. I can tell you, I would have saved several thousands in my life by now if I could get lit that cheaply. More stories of blotto animals followed. There was some zoo I visited in Florida where the mulberry trees dropped a bunch of overripe berries and the monkeys in the enclosure ate tons of them and got drunk as all heck. I've seen squirrels do this with walnut trees. The husk around the nut ferments, yard full of drunk squirrels. It was pretty cute actually. My aunt turned her barn into a nice little place to throw parties. Full bar and everything. One night a bunch of raccoons got in and managed to get into a bottle of whiskey and some beers. They got pretty hammered and went on a pigeon-killing rampage. Isn't nature amazing? Saw 2 people doing the deed against the wall of the main train station wall at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday night. The cops pulled the guy out of her 5 minutes after I showed up. So, my takeaway is that you were watching for at least 5 minutes. Maybe they hired those cops to be the contraception. Coptraception. Mine's a very gruesome what the frick. One time back when I was a student, I was waiting for my train home to leave, and as there were several minutes left, I was enjoying a sandwich outside on the platform. On the other side of the platform stood another train and a young couple, saying goodbyes and kissing, and the man still stood in the door as the train started to leave. I took a bite out of my sandwich. The man gave his girlfriend a last kiss and swung the door shut as he was jumping off. A piece of his jacket, or perhaps trousers, got caught up and he fell to the platform, got dragged under the train and promptly crushed in a gruesome fashion, with blood and other tissue spraying everywhere as his girlfriend stood and watched, paralyzed in absolute horror. People in the train were banging on the windows and screaming for it to stop. People on the platform were in absolute panic and some of them had bits of the unfortunate guy on them. And I stood there with a half-chewed bite of my sandwich in my mouth and my jaws wide open in astonishment. I don't think I will ever again see something as disturbing in my life happening so innocuously and within a few heartbeats, or chews. My husband and I were in a mall in Bethesda, Maryland when we passed a Tyson chicken kiosk where Mary Lou Retton was demonstrating how awesome Tyson chicken is. We watched for a moment and then walked on toward the mall exit. A short way down the mall we see a young woman escorting a person in a chicken costume towards the kiosk. The chicken appears to be splattered with blood-red paint and they're carrying a bucket. They pass us and we stop. Did you see… Was that a chicken? Not wanting to miss what was sure to be a spectacle, we turned around and followed the chick and her chicken friend to the Tyson chicken stage. The chicken-costumed man runs towards the stage and tosses red liquid at Mary Lou Retton, who despite her Olympian status is unable to avoid it entirely. Security guards immediately rush the chicken and grab him, while the woman screams about how Tyson murders chickens. As security drags the couple away, we hear the young woman shouting, "Stop choking the chicken! Stop choking the chicken!" I still can't believe that happened. This happened in Ireland. That's Limerick City. We'd closed up the restaurant for the night and were cleaning it up. 2 women began knocking on the doors, asking us to let them in. They looked pretty distressed, so we let them in. They had been attacked on the street. We sat them down and rang the Gardaí. It was then we noticed the blood. One of the women had multiple puncture wounds on her back. She didn't even realize. They just felt the blow and assumed it was just punches, but whoever attacked them had stabbed them with a screwdriver or something. They were pretty upset, but were remarkably calm considering they were full of holes.
Pretty what the frick moment for us in the restaurant. Shock and adrenaline can help you cope with anything, it seems. The EMTs arrived and took them to the hospital. Another time, same restaurant, late night after the nightclub crowd, drunk students. A guy in the queue dropped money, bent down to pick it up, and stumbled into another guy. The guy who got bumped turned and bent down, clamped his teeth around the stumbler's ear, and tore it off. Spat it out and nonchalantly ordered his food. We put the ear on ice and called the ambulance. The paramedics lost the ear en route, and the poor guy never got it reattached. Well, my life is pretty mundane, but here goes nothing. When I was in middle school, my family still had a big old box TV. In fact, its stand was an even bigger broken TV that was built into a wood frame and swiveled. So one day, I had an open soda on top of the working TV and accidentally moved the swivel, thus knocking the soda off it. It did a full flip and landed right side up. Not a drop spilled. I proceeded to run outside and scream like a maniac. Probably the highlight of my life. I dropped a McDonald's drink once and it landed right on its lid and pushed the straw inside it and didn't spill. Did that right in school and had one kid see it. Why have none of my many beverages that I've spilled in my long lifetime ever done this? Perhaps I'm due for a few non-spill drops in my near future. I worked at a public shooting range for a number of years. One day back in 2009, me and a few of the employees were unloading the rental pieces from the safe to be put out on the firing line. The guy in front of me pulled out an Uzi and an SKS, both semi-auto, and he broke the #1 rule of weapon safety and had them both pointed up towards him. Long story short, he dropped the SKS and the bolt went into the trigger guard of the Uzi, which had the grip safety disabled, which was inexplicably loaded as well. It shot through his thumb, which was over the barrel, and right through his head. He fell to the floor, but didn't die until the helicopter ride on the way to the hospital. I just don't get when people take weapon safety so casually. It's one rule, but gosh darn it, so many people can't follow it. I once saw a woman shoot herself in the stomach at a public range. Rather, I saw the blood trail, because after this woman shot herself, she calmly packed up, got in her car, and drove the frick away. All while bleeding out of her stomach and without anybody noticing. Saw it all on the tapes later. How she wasn't freaking the frick out, I will never understand. I once witnessed a Mexican standoff in a crowded parking lot. Did anyone end up firing, or was it a cliffhanger where you had to wait until the next episode? They ended up yelling at each other for a few minutes and then leaving. Anticlimactic, but it was the best outcome. There's this older woman who goes to the same gym as I do, probably early 60s with bright blue pigtails. The only thing she does at the gym is stand in the middle of the weight room eating a papaya like a chipmunk every single day. This has been going on for years. Hey, she took the first step. One of these days she's going to work out. In my middle school, a fight broke out between two girls. One of the girls yanked on the other girl's hair so hard a patch of it came off and you could visibly see some blood leaking out of that area. That scream was something I'll never forget. When I was 12, my whole street was running garage sales on a Saturday morning. Towards one end, there were two sales next to each other and one across the street. Everyone was out and about, including myself. I was surveying my spending options when out flies a deer from behind two houses, darts across the street and jumps right through the family room window of the house in the corner lot, shattered glass and all. From within the house, I could see the deer bucking wildly and spattering blood all over the white-painted walls. The father commando rushes in, and after 17 seconds of chaos, yelling and screaming, the deer struggles back out of the window and limps away, bleeding a trail behind it. The commando dad slowly comes back out of the front door carrying his 6-year-old girl. She's pale white from shock and has her father's neck in a vice grip. She was the one screaming. The deer was later found dead 4 blocks away. It's super vanilla, but one time I drove by a topless, obese man taking a kitten out of a mailbox. That was like 5 years ago, and I still wonder about the context. Haha, finally, I got some tail. Just a few days ago, dolphins in the river. I thought I'd gone crazy, but then I saw them 5 more times in the next 30 minutes. I'm still searching in the web whether it's possible. Is it? River dolphins are a thing, man. Google them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I saw an ambulance hit a person riding a motorcycle. Don't know if that made it lucky or unlucky for the motorcyclist. I was in my car turning around to get into a parking space when I see that the space I wanted was occupied by a woman sitting on the curb taking a dump. Needless to say, I parked elsewhere. Was walking in central London to university about 6 years ago. Just me and two guys ahead on their bikes on the pavement chatting. They looked real normal. A city police van drives past me and stops at the traffic light. Suddenly, about 5 officers burst out of the back with SMGs, a rare sight in the UK, and grab these two guys, guns in their faces, and drag them into the vans. Sirens on, and off they go. Biggest what the frick is why I didn't take the 2 free bikes. Taking the vehicles of 2 wanted suspects that may or may not have had substances stashed in them for all you know might not have been your best move in the long term. Best leave them be or take them to the station yourself. You know, a similar thing happened to me. I was driving to my parents in a suburban area and I stopped at a 4-way stop. Another car at the stop sign to the right of me stopped first. I was waiting for him to go. Suddenly, 3 cars box this one car in against the curb and 4 undercover cops get out. They pull the guy out of the car, bend him over the hood of his car, cuff him, and throw him into the back of an unmarked police car. Then I guess they were calling for backup and tow trucks, since they had their lights going and were standing on their walkie-talkies. I just sat at the 4-way stop, jaw hanging open until everything settled down. Then I just continued on my way. I think back to that and wonder if it actually happened sometimes. My first day in Seattle, way back in the summer of '99, I saw a hipster on Capitol Hill in unzipped skinny jeans walking his dog with the leash handle around his frankenbeans. Welcome to Seattle, where you can see at least one seriously what the frick moment every single day without even trying. I saw a lady I refer to as the Bird Lady in the metro station in Shanghai, China. She was putting sausage into her mouth, chewing it up so it was in small pieces and salivary, and then spitting it back into the waiting mouth of her granddaughter who had her mouth open and waiting like a little bird. It was gross, and I still remember it 4 years later. Riding the train on my way home from work one Friday night, and a small group of college students comes on, clearly already pre-gaming at like 6 p.m. They're talking and being loud, and I notice that one of the girls has some stuff leaking out of the little drawstring bag she's bringing with her. I think to myself, damn, that's gonna suck when she finds out. Not a moment later, she turns to her friends and says, "Hey guys, I just peed, ha!" And without missing a beat, they all just laugh and one guy goes, "Oh, Brittany." And they all just get off the train as the doors open, still laughing and being kids, while the rest of us commuters are just staring dumbfounded at this puddle of pee on the floor now. A monkey once jumped onto my lap. I was in a car in Asia and stretched out its hand. I gave it $1 and it ran away and gave it to its master, who was waiting nearby. What are they gonna do? Arrest a monkey? It's genius. Walking through a forest path at my university, I saw 2 crows taking on a snake. I watched for like 5 minutes as the birds were trying to peck at the snake and the snake was picking which bird to lunge at. It seemed like the birds were going for the snake's eyes. It felt like that scene in Chamber of Secrets where Fawkes takes out the basilisk. A drive-by on a neighbor's house, in the middle of the day, in apartments, while we had a party and a bouncy house out front full of kids. A few months ago, I was driving on the motorway and a car pulled over into the hard shoulder ahead of me. The passengers jumped out and literally a few seconds later, it just exploded, like Michael Bay level exploded. Luckily, the passengers were just far away not to be harmed. I was with a friend passing by a bar terrace when one guy stepped in front of us, dropped down onto his knee and proposed to me. He actually had an engagement ring and held out his hand. His friends kind of gathered around and cheered on. I just laughed and walked around him, forgot to say I was 16 or 17 at the time and the guy was in his mid-20s. Be sure to carry around a positive pregnancy test for the next time this happens, so you can pull it out and tell him you dreamed this would happen because your little family will soon be 3. Last summer, some friends and I decided to go and drop acid down at a lake near where we lived. We found a comfortable private spot to set up camp and began our trip. About 3 to 4 hours in, we start swimming around, tripping our balls off as we play in the water and watch the clouds go crazy. Then, we hear some noises and look over to see a fat, shirtless redneck in jean shorts and his wrinkly, way too tan wife steering a small boat towards the shore near us. We start to get a little worried as they get nearer and nearer, not sure how we're going to play it cool with them being that close to us. Then all of a sudden we see a little wiener dog hop off the boat, followed by another and another, until eventually there are 7 little wiener dogs running around the shore right in front of us. After what was probably 30 minutes to an hour, the man whistled and they all ran back to the boat and hopped in, sailing into the sunset never to be seen again. It was a very strange occurrence and I wouldn't have trusted my own eyes if my friends hadn't seen it as well. Sitting at a cafeteria late at night in my shady neighborhood. A BMW drives up the parking lot and a man gets out and walks away. BMWs are not something you leave unattended here, so it was already a bit weird, but whatever, I have food. A few minutes later, another guy walks up to the car looking around suspiciously. He grabs the frickin' keys from behind the front wheel somewhere, gets in, and drives off. I have no idea what kind of deal this was, but if you get a frickin' BMW for free with it, then I ain't seen nothing. So if whatever you're selling comes with a $40,000 luxury sedan, are you dealing in multi-million-dollar munitions chips, or were there just two Stormy Daniels in the back seat? At my university, I watched an eagle, which aren't common in my area, swoop down and kill a squirrel early in the morning. It was at LSU, and it was a bald eagle. As for the squirrel, I have no idea. A typical brown squirrel, I suppose. It was pretty brutal, but the squirrel was instantly lifeless as soon as the eagle made contact, so at least it wasn't made to suffer. My friend nearly shot me in the face when I was 15. I showed him my brother's SIG 9mm with hollow point bullets, then took the clip out and handed it to my friend. He proceeded to point-blank aim the weapon at me and pull the trigger. With one in the chamber, it literally put a small cut in the shoulder of my shirt. "What the frick, man? Why is there one in the chamber?" "What the frick, man? It's a piece. Don't point and shoot unless you plan to kill." "What the frick myself, not checking the chamber. You know your brother's an idiot." I was driving through town one evening and I stopped at a stop sign. I looked out my window and see a kid 10 years old or so dressed up like a banana. We make eye contact and he starts dancing. What the frick?
"Did you check your watch to see if it was peanut butter jelly time?"
I was on vacation this past year in the Dominican Republic and for some reason our rental had issues. When turning the car on, the alarm would go off and not shut off. Eventually, we learned to deal with it and just drive until it shut off. So one day we're driving with the alarm on and one of their army men pulled us over. We anticipated him coming up to say something about the alarm. Instead, he starts chasing down a Haitian selling fruit. The Haitian tries to run and the army man shoots him with his M16. I crapped myself at that moment. I saw a seagull eating another dead seagull in a Sears parking lot. It happened when I was 12. On my way home, a strange guy, probably 16 or 17, appeared in front of me. I was scared as frick because he looked very brutal. He then came directly towards me and kissed my cheek, followed by the words, "God loves you," and then proceeded to run away, laughing like crazy. I nearly crapped my pants, but it was worth it. I was at a party with some mates, and of course beer pong starts going down. Now, one of my mates was so wasted out of his mind that he could barely stand up, let alone get anything in. Adding to this, he was the worst at any sport you could think of. But somehow, in his inebriated state, he was getting every single ping pong ball in all the cups. He must have had an 80% accuracy rate or something ridiculous. He remembers none of it.
He was so drunk he forgot he was crap at sports.
I don't know if it's the most what the frick thing, but it did just happen. I was driving along and saw a car ram into the back of a black SUV. The SUV pulls over and the car stops. 3 angry, obese Asian men jump out of the SUV carrying tire irons and a baseball bat, and literally jump on the car, battering the crap out of it, breaking the windshield, etc. One of them breaks the passenger's window and tries to drag the driver out. The driver backs up at speed, fat Asians tumbling everywhere. Puts it into drive to ram the car again. Fat Asians are running into the SUV now, while the car dude backs up, rams them, backs up and rams them again. Fat Asian SUV speeds away, weaving through traffic, followed by broken windshield, jacked up sedan guy, music still blasting from the speakers. In Philly back in the 80s, going into the Spectrum to see the Sixers play the Knicks, guy got stabbed in the chest about 20 feet in front of us. He fell to the side with his blade sticking out of his chest next to the turnstile. People passed by him like it was nothing. I was walking in St. Petersburg, Russia, while studying abroad. We were in a shopping or residential area off Nevsky Prospect when a police car shows up. Now, this wasn't an area where cars normally went, so it was strange. Then 4 guys got out of the car, opened the trunk, and put on FSB bulletproof vests and small arms. They looked like SMGs, but I wasn't close enough to tell. They then proceeded to walk into an apartment building. I told our group we had to get the frick out of there. What was your most serious,
"Thank God I double-checked"
moment? Looking through papers to shred, I opened an envelope and inside was a $2,500 check. It was a refund from when we refinanced our mortgage. Things like that is why checks are such an outdated concept. Why couldn't they deposit it directly into your bank account? I think they'd certainly be happy had the check been shredded. Student pilot 8 years ago. Got fuel in a high-wing training airplane. The instructor was ready to go. I'd done the pre-flight before the fuel truck arrived. You can't see the fuel caps from the ground. I was about to start the engine, but got out, hopped up on the step, and found both caps loose. You always do your whole pre-flight yourself, no excuses. Someone could have just landed and delivered it to you fully fueled. Run the whole check anyway. Fly to another airport and park it for lunch. Full pre-flight before you head home. Full checklist every time. Not a pilot, great-grandfather was. He imparted wisdom on my grandmother who shared it with me when I expressed interest on getting flying lessons. Everyone on the runway is a frickin' idiot. You can never be too sure someone didn't mess with your plane. Check it out, then check it again. 'Cause a car crash might not kill you, but a plane crash will. Was paying my mortgages online and almost added an extra digit to my payment amount. That would have sucked so bad because it could have wiped my checking account out. My dad transferred $40,000 to his mortgage instead of his savings. He's still trying to get it back.
He'll lose interest eventually?
Almost submitted a test paper without my name on it. Almost forgot my room keys before a 6-hour drive back to my university. I think this applies. So summer 2010, my family is having the inside of the house painted. Hot as all hell, so my parents leave the upstairs windows open day and night to let out the paint smell and help it dry with the hot air. I really don't like this. I'm a naturally paranoid person. This went on for several weeks. We have a pretty big house. One day before I leave school, I decided to go upstairs and shut the window and lock it. They can yell at me later if they want. When I came home that afternoon, the painter told me, "Hey, that big ladder you have on the side of the house was getting in the way, so I moved it. Hope that's okay." I responded, "We don't have a big ladder." Apparently someone came up to the house and set up a ladder to get through the open window, but I'd closed it just by chance that day. I guess they saw our painter coming and they ditched it and split, sans ladder. Oddly enough, my parents kept opening the window at night and during the day after all that crap. Yes, we came up on a free ladder, but I'm scared of heights. Gotta say, those robbers don't seem like the most committed types, or maybe they're just smarter than me and they know when to cut and run.
Answering exams and I finished early. Double-checked when the teacher reminded us that there were only 5 minutes left and saw that I hadn't answered the whole backside of a page. Luckily, it was multiple choice though.
Oh my god, this happened to me in high school. I stayed up all night studying for a difficult history test, finished pretty early and felt like I did decently well on it. Went to my teacher's office later in the day to ask a question and she casually mentioned the backside of the test. Me? There was a backside? Teacher? Oh god, you didn't know? No. At this point, I just broke down and started crying in her office. I couldn't believe I was going to fail the exam I'd stayed up all night for because I was too much of an exhausted idiot to turn the damn page over. Luckily, she took pity on me and let me do the reverse side of the test right then and there in her office. I'm still so grateful that she was so kind. Many other teachers would have said, "TS," and let me fail. I was at a four-way intersection at night when my light turned green. I was the only car on the road and in a hurry, but something in me felt like I needed to look left before I went. Right after I turned my head to look, a car without any headlights on ran the red light, doing probably 50 miles per hour. Had I just immediately gone instead of glancing left, I would have been T-boned and probably killed. Listen to your gut, people. Reminds me of the one time my friend and I were going back to his place. We'd stopped at the lights and he was right behind me, and the light turned green. Well, I looked before going, because that's a good idea, and at night as well. Saw a guy coming down the street, at least they had their lights on, and just sat because I knew they weren't going to stop. Not sure if I would have got through or not, but you can just tell some people aren't going to stop at the light. I was rock climbing Apple Valley, California. I was in a rush and a bit teed off that I had to clean a route that someone had already agreed to do and then bailed at the last second. My belayer was preoccupied in a conversation and didn't check my knot. I jumped on the climb and got a really bad feeling right before I got to the first bolt. I decided to recheck everything and noticed my knot was half done. I stopped and double-checked everything else before continuing. That moment comes to mind before every sport climb. I also never had that friend belay me again. I once worked at a school where I had to look after the kids who stayed until their parents picked them up. Don't know what it's called in English, after-school care? They usually had the classic little game where they would hide and I pretended not to know where they were and told the parents that I hadn't seen them all day. Problem is that they would do this 2 or 3 at a time and then come out all together. Usually. One time this kid started hiding with some others at around 6 p.m. but didn't come out at all. So he kept hiding away until 7 p.m. at the end of my shift. Thank frick that during my closing routine I found him in some ridiculous tiny little space because I totally forgot about him. I had about 40 to 50 parents come in between 6 and 7. When his mother came to pick him up way later than I expected, I acted all jolly, but I seriously would have closed off since I thought all the children had left. Not a proud moment. I almost killed my niece's cat via washing machine. I was staying with my brother and his family for a bit when I first moved to the city. One day I threw a bunch of clothes in the machine, went back to my room to get a sweater, threw that into the machine on top of the curious feline that had jumped in while I was out of the room, poured in the detergent and just about closed the lid when I decided to double-check the pocket of my sweater. As soon as I moved it out jumped the cat. Never told anyone, but I made a point of checking from then on. Very recently, I changed a light bulb at work in a corridor that rarely got used. A long fluorescent bulb. As I was walking away, turning a corner, I realized the pitch of the hum of the light seemed off. Just seemed higher pitched than normal. I went back to check to make sure the light was on. It was on fire. Don't know if it was the bulb or the fixture, but the whole thing was in flames and the light was on. Dealt with it, but if I'd kept walking, the building would probably have taken serious damage before sprinklers kicked in. A colleague of mine saved me. I'd printed around 500 letters for him, and when I handed them over, he said the phone number didn't look right. I dialed it to check, and it was an adult phone line for lonely people. I'd put 2 numbers the wrong way around. We changed our number after that in case any customers misdialed. So glad that my colleague spotted it before those letters were sent out. I woke up late at night feeling thirsty. Everything was dark. I always keep a glass of water by the bed. I grope for the glass and grab it, and I'm about to take a swig when I suddenly think, no, better check. So I put it down and stumble groggily over to the light and switch it on, and there was a huge cockroach floating dead in the glass. And the gagging narrator award for an image so gross and sudden that you pause my recording process temporarily goes to you, sir or madam. Congratulations. Although admittedly, in this job the award gets handed out so frequently that it's worth slightly less than an Emmy, but more than a Tony. This was before backup cameras. I put the car in reverse with my foot on the brake and turned to look behind me. I just saw the ponytail of a little girl disappear behind my car as she bent over to pick up a toy. Away in the distance, her mum was running flat out, her face contorted in terror like I've never seen before. Not really a double check, but that's my story. Citations on an English paper. Every fricking time. One time I was putting my hair straightener away and I dropped it into the toilet. As soon as it hit the water, it started hissing and sizzling, and I assumed it was because it was still hot. For a second, I went to reach over and yank it out. Then I was like, wait, it's still plugged in. It never tripped the safety switch that bathroom outlets usually have because this house was old and didn't have bathroom outlets. I had to run a cheap extension cord from the office to the bathroom to do my hair. Literally almost grabbed a live electrical appliance that was shorting out in water. I'd copied a naughty adult link to send to my boyfriend, ended up not sending it by the way, and later was emailing my students to update them about something else. Accidentally pasted the link into the email and almost sent 20 college students a link to Pornhub. Short term, printing everything off for a London-Edinburgh trip last year and realised when double-checking our train tickets from London to Edinburgh, they were the wrong day. We still had one more day in London. Nothing could be done until we got to London, but if we hadn't noticed before getting to the train station on the day out, it would have been costly. Long term, this stretches the definition of double-checked, but it's still important. I tried to give blood a few times while I was in the Navy, but my iron was always too low no matter what I ate recently. Decided to check it out, got tests done, and I was anemic. Doctor asks if I want to just treat that or go further. Of course, go further and find out why I'm anemic. 18 months and a zillion tests later, Crohn's disease. Since caught while I was in the service, I got a medical retirement discharge, some cash, a monthly stipend, and full healthcare. If I'd just got the anemia treated, I would have gone out while sick, deeper in, and would probably be in a world of pain right now. I was driving a reach truck, working overnight at some depot. Another guy had crawled in to move a box. I don't know what the frick he was thinking, and I never double-checked because why the frick would I? Always did after that. If I hadn't, he'd be dead. I was pretty shaken and he was oblivious. It was such a seemingly minor thing to everyone except the guy driving the reach. I told him that if I'm driving the reach, he needs to stay the frick out of the aisle and his family can be glad that I lifted that load to look. I assume he just thought I was being a butthole, because he didn't seem to have any idea how close he came to dying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was cleaning my room and throwing out a bunch of school papers, old envelopes, etc. I'm always nervous throwing out garbage bins in apartments. I guess the garbage chute seems more permanent than a bin that's collected weekly. Because there were so many papers and I was moving, I decided to double-check that bag. I had an envelope of over $1,300 in saving bonds and tips that I'd hidden in my drawer earlier in the year. I felt like I'd made $1,300 that day. I have a very similar story. My parents were moving out of their house, so I was cleaning all of my stuff that I still had stashed there. I found a box of papers from grad school. I graduated more than 20 years ago. I looked through it briefly, took out the graded copy of my master's thesis, and was going to throw the rest away. It was all just papers and notes from classes I'd taken, and I'd figured I'd never have any use for any of it. As I was taking the box to recycling, I just had a weird feeling that I should take the time to look through it all. So I started going through each folder. Lo and behold, I found a folder that must have had about $500 in savings bonds that I'd brought to school, and I guess I must have forgotten about. Veterinarian here. I asked for my assistant to bring me some glucose to inject into a 2-kilogram dog with hypoglycemia. He brings me this vial, and right as I was about to open it, I looked at it, and it was potassium chloride, KCl, which is used for euthanasia. Both were the same size and shape, but the one that would stop the dog's heart had a big black stamp on it, so it wasn't hard to differentiate them. As an extra, a professor of mine during a surgery asked for an antibiotic, which needs to be diluted before use, to inject after surgery was done. The intern brought the vial already diluted, but instead of putting injection water into the bottle, he'd actually put KCl. As the professor was injecting the antibiotic, she noticed the heart of the dog was stopping, but fortunately, the amount needed to kill the animal was a bit higher and they were able to save it. When they asked and saw what he'd actually put into the bottle, she went nuts on him for not double-checking it before diluting. I don't know what happened to the student. This is what I've always thought when I bring my cat into the vet for shots updates. I thought, that's ridiculous, they probably have the bottles for euthanasia marked and kept in a different spot. Thank you for terrifying me. Yes, thank you for enlightening all of us that we're one tired medical personnel away from a lethal injection at any given time. Fabulous. Ooh, I have one for this. I've lived in a few places over the years, but they all have one thing in common. Spiders, and lots of them. At an early age, I learned to always smack the heels of my shoes against the floor, my knee, etc. to knock out any spiders that might have crashed in my shoes overnight. One day, I was getting ready to leave the house and something interrupted that little ritual. Came back and couldn't remember if I'd checked and was about to slip them on when I decided to make sure, and sure enough, there was one that fell right out onto my knee. But it wasn't just any spider, no, it was a freaking black widow. After jumping up and possibly crapping myself in the process, I found it dancing across the floor and dealt with it. But good lord, the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't double-checked still makes my skin crawl to this day. Every time I'm driving and I'm turning into a different lane, I always check over my shoulder. I check all of my mirrors, then look over my shoulder. Do you know how many times it looks clear to merge into a different lane based off the mirrors, but when I finally look over my shoulder, I see someone right next to me? Especially bloody motorcyclists. A bit of background first. My university degree was split between two of the departments of my university, the Humanities Department and the Law and Social Sciences Department. I mostly worked with humanities, with LSS handling about 30 to 40% of my degree. So at the start of my final year, I got my standard email from humanities asking me to sign up for my history modules for the year. Oddly, there was no matching email from LSS for my politics modules, but I figured that I was probably only having politics modules in the second semester. Which was a stupid assumption, but also plausible. A couple of months into the semester, I get an email informing me that I won't have enough credits to graduate at the end of the year. What? So yeah, the university's student services had gone through some internal restructuring, and in the process, I'd become that one person who slips through the net. I had to rush and sign up for politics modules quickly. I was confirmed on them a couple of days later. I was chatting about it with a friend and thought, I should check to see when my first politics essay is due. It was 5 days away. I hadn't been to a single seminar or lecture. Well, crap. Happy ending. With 2 days to go, I managed to get in contact with my tutor, who got me a 2-week extension for extenuating circumstances after student services ignored my original application for an extension. It was my worst essay of my university career, but it was a pass, so screw it. This is more of a thank frick I had my husband double-check, but anyways. Last week we went to bed downstairs a little late since our 3-year-old had colic. We lived in a half-finished apartment and heard a weird sound like the bulkhead door had been opened from the unfinished half of the basement. I, of course, thought someone had broke in or an animal had got in, so we locked ourselves in the room with our daughter and 4-year-old son and then called my brother-in-law who lives upstairs to check on it, since I didn't want to risk our children. He checks and clears it, but I just couldn't sleep after, which was a good thing since not even 10 minutes after he went upstairs, I heard a thump and sheet metal hitting the floor. At this point, I told my husband to quickly go out of the room, lock the door behind him and run up to get our dog. who is not people-friendly at all to those outside our family or close friends, to have him check the basement. When my husband went out, he looked over to see a panel had come off our furnace and it was billowing smoke and the fire alarms weren't going off. Thankfully, I knew where the emergency shutoff was. To keep this as short as possible, if I hadn't insisted my husband go out again, we might have been overcome by smoke inhalation in our sleep along with my sister and her whole family. In conclusion, furnace almost caught fire while the family was sleeping in a house with apparently faulty smoke alarm systems. Get your furnaces checked regularly and make sure you know where your emergency shutoff is, and test your fire alarms. Don't know if this counts, but I had a weird feeling something was off about my wife's behavior. Checked her phone, which I'd never done before and felt terrible about, and found out she cheated on me. It led to a cascade of discovery, as in she was in a relationship with this guy and getting pregnant from him and had had an abortion while visiting her family. Getting divorced now, please don't take this as you shouldn't trust your partner, but be aware of changes in behavior. Winter here in Sweden. I took out the trash. The door was slightly ajar, but the dogs are really good with staying inside when they're supposed to. Came back inside, sat down, felt a bit uneasy and went to the door. I opened it and the Chihuahua was just there in the garden taking a wee. The dog probably wouldn't have survived for long in -13. How long does a body that tiny and with that many biological dead ends maintain its internal temperature for in temperatures like that? 5 seconds? Sorry, Chihuahua owners. I never shared this story before, so I can finally get this off my chest. When I was 16, I got a call from a friend who was alone at home, and he asked if I wanted to come over for pizza and a video game. And I thought, sure, why not? After a nice evening of food, games and movies, I noticed that he was a little bit off. And it wasn't like him. At one point I asked if he was okay and we started to talk about girls, life, and problems of 16-year-old boys. Before leaving out, I asked if he wanted me to sleep over so he had some company for the weekend, and he just said, "No, I'll just order more pizza and keep playing at night, but thanks man." Well, I went out the door, and after walking around 10 meters from it, I noticed that I didn't close it properly. So I returned, and before closing, I remember thinking, I'm gonna give a check on him. Within 10 minutes of leaving his house and returning, that mother effer had tried to self-delete. I don't want to share more details about it, it's hard to write while all the memories are returning about this topic, but today he is happy with 3 kids and a perfect marriage. We see each other once a year and we always cry after a big hug. I wasn't the one who double-checked, but I am so thankful that the person in question did. Storytime, my high school decided to take the senior class to Six Flags at the end of our year. I'd recently gotten over my fear of roller coasters and decided to ride the Superman ride. Little did I know I'd buckled my seatbelt completely wrong. If it wasn't for the worker who checks everyone's seatbelt before the ride starts, I would have flown out of my seat like Superman and died. I know that moment usually feels like an inconvenience, like hurry up and start the ride, but it seriously saved my life. My first full-time job after college, I was a receptionist and office manager for an office. Within the first couple of weeks, I was told to put in an order for office supplies and was given a list of what to order. Since it was a huge office, there were large quantities of things, of course. While putting everything in, I had accidentally added a 0 at the end of one of the entries. Had I not double-checked, we would have had 1,000 boxes of reams of printer paper delivered instead of the 100 my boss requested. I don't like to think how that would have gone over, being so new at the job, let alone where we would have put that many big heavy boxes. In the German military, one base accidentally ordered 20,000 sunscreens instead of 20,000 bullets. My car is old enough that the lights don't turn themselves off. I have to do it manually. I've had my battery die many times because of this. On vacation in a different state, many hours away from anyone who could help me get my battery recharged, I very nearly walked away with the lights still on, but I turned around to check because I had a funny feeling. Delivery driver carrying acetylene on a flatbed truck. Co-worker had strapped down my load for me before I left for delivery, but I always check it myself just in case. I was able to pop the strap off with my bare hand because it had shifted and gotten some slack in it. Had I not checked, that 300-plus pound bottle of flammable gas could have fallen off like a bomb on the freeway. What's your most awkward, "sorry, but I don't work here" experience? Made the mistake of wearing an orange t-shirt to Home Depot. I was approached 4 or 5 times walking back to the lumber section. The funny thing is the expression of confusion and denial on people's faces. I would say, "Oh, I don't work here, I just wore the wrong shirt today," and they would stare at me perplexed, wondering if I was messing with them. I was at a local thrift store, looking at old typewriters with my sister. They were very, very cheap, and she's a writer, so I was buying her one. There was a fellow there who heard me ask out loud a question about how it works. He was a nice old guy who came over and showed me the inner workings of the unit for a solid 50 to 60 minutes. He was very passionate about typewriters and had expert-level knowledge. After an hour of him showing me everything you could imagine with a typewriter and how they work, I asked a question about the price. He responds with, "Well, I don't know about that because I don't work here. I just like typewriters." He was probably lonely. There's an older gentleman who used to be a professional photographer but had to retire due to being constrained to a wheelchair. He hangs around our camera displays a few hours every week and talks to people about cameras. He's so knowledgeable and so enthusiastic that no one's complained since he started doing it over a year ago. I was at a local computer and game store, and this elderly gentleman asked me where they put the controllers for PS3. I told him, sorry, I don't work here, so I don't really know. He said, seriously, why would you even work here if you don't know where anything is, dummy? 10 out of 10 would go to that store again. Imagine the asinine people the folks who do work here have to put up with then. Source, I work at a video game store. I was browsing movies at HMV when a lady came up to me and asked if I had Star Wars on Blu-ray. I was like, yeah, of course, they're my favorites. Then she asks where they are. At my house. That's when I realized she thought I worked there and wasn't just wanting to talk about Star Wars. I was in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, a very busy store. I asked the shop owner something and he just said, give me a plastic bag. Which I did, I understand Turkish. Then I helped him for a couple of minutes putting things in bags. I was just trying to help since he was really stressed out. He apologized so many times when he realized I wasn't one of his employees, and he gave me a discount. I mean, what was that guy's employee turnover that he didn't recognize whether someone in his shop was an employee or not? Or is this a one of those faces issue? In 2004, I worked at a Petco that was right next to a Best Buy, so the same blue shirt and khakis, only different logos. I went over to pick up a game right after work and got sucked into a chat with a guy about picking out a laptop. After 10 minutes of going through the pros and cons of various brands, he decides he'd like to get one. I was just like, cool, well, good luck with that. I used to work in a bar that was about a 5-minute walk from Tesco, a grocery store. Every Saturday afternoon, the bar would hit a lull between 4 and 5, so I'd get sent to Tesco to pick up fruit, mint, and juice for the night. And seemingly every Saturday, some customer in Tesco would come up to me and mistake me for staff there. My work uniform didn't even look similar to the Tesco uniform. I've never understood it. The best case of mistaking me for someone who worked in Tesco was this. A woman who came up to me while I had my hands full of cartons of juice. She started complaining about the crappy service and unhelpful staff. I tried telling her that I didn't work there, but she kept cutting me off. Eventually, she demanded to speak to my manager. I responded with, oh, you'll have to go to the bar around the corner to speak to the manager, that's where she is. The woman looked shocked for a second, but then said, oh, well, that explains why this place is run like a poor excuse for a circus. Your manager is off in a bar drinking on the job. I should have guessed it. To which I responded, no, I work in that bar, and I was sent here for stock. If you want to speak to my manager, you can go to my workplace and talk to her. She realized immediately the mistake she'd made and became much nicer and very apologetic to me. You know someone is a terrible person when you can see them transform so quickly from monster to angel. Then you just know that they abuse that ability and have the power to be a jerk to someone and convince everyone else that it's the other way round because they're always nice otherwise. When I was done working and had gotten back to my apartment, still in my mailman clothes, I was stopped by a woman asking me whether or not I had her package. I had to explain to her that I wasn't at work and that I'd been her neighbor the past 2 years. I was at dinner in a decent restaurant in LA. I was wearing a suit but had taken my jacket off and wasn't wearing a tie, so it was black shoes and pants and a white shirt. I went to the bathroom and was passing this table, and this guy grabbed my arm as I was walking past and said, sorry, could you find out where our wine is? We asked you ages ago. At this point, I hadn't realized I resembled the staff in this place and was a bit shell-shocked. So I said, sure, and went for a tinkle. On my way back, I thought I'd be a dutiful human being and go and tell the barman, as it was on my way, that this guy hadn't had his wine. The barman slapped his forehead and said, hang on, and gave me a glass of white to take to him, which I did and apologized for the delay, and the guy appreciated it too. Then I sat down and went on with my dinner. You probably broke a liquor law by doing that. You're nice, though. I was at Target right after work. I had on a red polo and khakis, and it had my company name embroidered on it that starts with a T. I was doing some network stuff, so I wasn't wearing my normal dress clothes. I forget what I was buying, but I had my cart full and my purse over my shoulder. A woman asked me where the laundry detergent was. I'm used to this, so I just told her that I think it's down a few aisles. The woman lost her ever-loving mind on me, saying that I was a horrible employee, I should know where everything is in my store, I'll never be paid above minimum wage because I'm so stupid. She wanted my name, my supervisor's name, and the number to corporate. It was after her rant that I politely informed her, "Ma'am, I don't work here. I was just telling you where I saw it while shopping for my own stuff." She didn't believe me and went to find a manager. I went to the checkout. I guess she found a manager and brought him to where I was checking out, started demanding that he reprimand me. He then informed her that I didn't in fact work there. She was flabbergasted and just walked away. No apology, no nothing. The manager, however, did apologize to me. I told him no problem, not his fault. You can't fix stupid. In conclusion, I no longer wear red polos to Target. Once I was at Walmart pretty late at night, around 11. I think I was looking for cold medicine or something like that. Anyway, a woman who looks to be in her late 30s, I'm 20, comes up to me and shows me her child's school supply list, asking if I can help her find some portfolio folder or something. I was about to tell her that I didn't work there when I saw her daughter, who looked to be around 7 or 8, in one of the aisles peeking out and looking tired and a little nervous. I know how Walmart can be in terms of finding an employee to help you, so I decided to just stick around and helped them find everything on the list. I realized that neither of them spoke very much English, which made some of the items on the lists confusing. It took a good 20 minutes, but they were both really grateful and nice. I guess it's not really an awkward story like you asked for, but still a story. In conclusion, helped a non-English speaking woman and her daughter find school supplies at Walmart, even though I don't work there. Haha, well that sounds like something quite a few people I know would do out of sheer social anxiety rather than inherent niceness. Still pretty great of you though. A couple of weeks ago I was at my local PetSmart chatting with the one guy there who actually knows his stuff. I have had a good deal of experience with aquariums, but I like to run my ideas by other people before I try them out. We were talking, but a customer came up so he broke off to assist them. As I was standing there looking at the fish, an old woman walks up to me and asks about what kind of bowl and food she should get for her goldfish her grandson had brought home from the fair. I started to tell her that I didn't work there, but as I glanced around, the guy I was talking to and the other employee were busy. So it went kind of like this. I don't really… You know, the thing is, goldfish actually need a fairly large aquarium, so you should either get at least a 30-gallon setup with this filter and such, or if you don't want to invest that much, I'm sure the store would be more than happy to take it off your hands. If you'd like a more manageable fish, I'd recommend AITA. Now, here are some good setups for them. Yada yada yada. I finish helping the old woman and immediately get another customer. At this point, I notice there's a mini rush as it's around 5-ish, and people are stopping by after work. This other customer comes up to me and asks a question about what fish would work well in her son's guppy tank. At this point, I'm pretty much committed and I decide to help her too. Eventually, after about 25 minutes and several more customers, the crowd thins out and I go back to my conversation with the employee. I ended up helping PetSmart sell several fish and one aquarium that day. In conclusion, PetSmart customer mistakes me for employee. I assist customers for half an hour because I'm too awkward to correct her. When I was a teenager, I worked in Virgin Records, renamed to Virgin Megastores in the UK now. I'd finished my shift and I'd had a pretty terrible day. I was browsing to buy a couple of CDs to cheer myself up. A customer walked up to me and started asking questions. I'd dealt with customers all day, so I breezily responded, "Sorry, I don't work here." So the customer responds, "But you're wearing a Virgin uniform." There was a super awkward pause during which I could have easily said I'm off duty and about to leave, and recovered, but in panic said, "I just like to wear it," and I walked out of the store. You know those moments when years later you recall an awkward encounter and just shudder? That's my scumbag brain's go-to moment. I had a similar experience while working at HMV many years ago. I'd just finished a shift in the run-up to Christmas, so I slapped a jumper over my HMV t-shirt and started walking toward the door, when a customer decided that it'd be okay to block my path and demand to know if I worked there. I said yes, but I was no longer on the clock and that I'd be more than happy to direct her to one of my colleagues, who she'd see were all wearing visible HMV shirts. She insisted that I help her anyway, and when I told her no, she flipped her lid and told me she'd be speaking with the manager and that I should be fired. I still can't get over the sense of entitlement some people have.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Around Christmas time, I was on my lunch hour, in my uniform, picking up some Christmas stuff. I was in a card shop and this man in his 60s hit me over the head with a wrapping paper roll as a joke, before apologizing profusely on realizing I was a customer there. Having said that, I don't know why that would ever be considered a thing to do to someone who you don't know whether they work there or not. I never resolved it. I was 16 and awkward. I was at the PX trying to pick out a rotisserie chicken for dinner when a guy came up to me and began asking where a couple of items were located in the store. Knowing that new people were always incoming, I told him what aisles some of the items were in, but then I said I was sorry for not knowing where one or two of them were located. He then got mad at me and said I should know the layout of where I work, and he was about to walk away angrily when I stopped him. I let him know that the people who work at the store wore a certain uniform, and as I wasn't wearing one, I obviously didn't work there. He still seemed mad and said, "Well, if you didn't look like a stock worker, you wouldn't have had to deal with me asking you questions." And then he walked off. My brother was at Best Buy and was mistaken for an employee because he was wearing a blue shirt. The first time someone asked him where something was, he politely told them he didn't work there, but he did tell them where the product was. The second time this happened, he thought he'd have some fun and pretty much had this guy following him all around the store looking for something my brother had no clue where it was. The guy eventually asked, "Do you even work here?" My brother simply replied, "Nope." The guy stormed out of the store so fast, my brother just went back to what he was doing. One time, my best friend and I were in Walmart digging in the $5 movie bin. We're standing looking at all these crappy movies, hoping to find a gem, when this random lady walks up and asks if we work there. I say, "Sorry ma'am, no we don't," and we continue digging through the bin. Well, this wasn't good enough for this lady. She stands there and asks us something about finding volleyball equipment. I forget exactly what it was she was looking for specifically. I asked if she looked through the sporting goods, which she was standing right in front of, and she says, "Well, yes of course, but I didn't see it. I thought y'all would know where it would be." At this point, my friend and I are both a little frustrated with the situation, so I tell her that we have no idea where else the volleyball equipment would be at the store. I ask if she's gone to Dick's Sporting Goods. That's when all heck broke loose. She raised her voice and started yelling about how she wasn't going to spend that much money and ranting and raving about the cost difference and this and that. My friend and I just looked at each other and walked away. In conclusion, lady wants to know where volleyball equipment is in Walmart and then yells at my friend and I, neither of us work there, for suggesting that she look at a dedicated sporting goods store. The dress code for the company I worked for was this black pullover and the standard dress shoes and trousers. I usually walk up to ASDA or Walmart for lunch and stood for about 5 minutes deciding which sweets or chocolate I should get. As I'm looking, I get a tap on the shoulder. There's a woman standing there and she begins shouting at me, "I have been standing here asking you for help for 5 minutes." I give a weird look and she realizes I don't work at ASDA and she gets embarrassed and walks away. As I'm walking to the till, I notice someone who actually worked at ASDA in kind of the same attire except for that they have an ASDA in big green letters on their jumper. Finally, a place to share my stories. When I was younger, around 14, I used to go shopping with my mother, as I'm sure lots of people do. She told me to wait outside the store while she quickly went in, and I, coincidentally, was wearing a similar outfit to the store clerks. Blue top, grey pants. An older woman walked towards me and practically yelled out that she had gone online and found a product she wanted and demanded that I take her to it. I politely said that I didn't work there and that was the end of it, right? Wrong. She claimed that I had to work there. I was wearing the uniform. I tried to argue otherwise, but she just insisted that I work there, and she'll tell my manager. Eventually, my mum returned and we both left, but I still fill with rage at the thought of this woman. "Ma'am, I don't work here." "Yes, you do." "Oh, okay." A reality-defying level of will to be a Karen on display here. Magnificent and inspiring, a feat of imagination we can all aspire to. Not awkward, but helpful. I noticed every helper in this store was ignoring this elderly lady. I happened to be wearing the same color of shirt and she came up to me for help. I happily helped her and even helped her go to the checkout lane. She tells me I'm a good employee and will write a nice letter to the company about me. A little backstory first. When I was about 11 years old, I went with my family to Philadelphia Zoo. It was about 80 degrees out and little me decided to wear a hoodie for some reason. Of course, I get too hot and need to take it off, but I forgot to wear a shirt underneath, so my parents brought me a shirt that said Philadelphia Zoo on it. So my family and I are walking around the gift shop right before we were about to leave. Little me is checking out some sweet stuffed animals when a middle-aged woman comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she says, "where can I find sunscreen?" I was kind of confused when she asked me, but I was happy to help since she asked politely. I quickly looked around and saw some non-souvenirs behind the counter. I'm guessing you can find it at the counter over there," I said. Then this woman gave me a look like she wasn't sure if I was intelligent or not. "So, you're just guessing?" she says. The way she said it made me realize something was off, but I didn't make the connection. Remember, I'm 11 fricking years old. "Yeah, I mean, there are batteries and stuff back there, so there should be sunscreen." She then gave me a quick smile and said, "Okay, thank you for your help." I didn't have a clue what happened until I told my dad what was happening as we were leaving. He started laughing and pointed out I was wearing the Philadelphia Zoo shirt, and this broad thought I'd worked there. My first day of class, someone thought I was a professor. I was only 20 and I didn't think I looked that old. "You've got to stop wearing the sweaters with the elbow pads, dude." I was on my break and decided to walk down the mall to the Bon, which is now Macy's. I was wandering around seeing what the sales were when I was approached by one of those high and mighty rich witches. She asked where something was and I told her I didn't work there. She got all huffy and stormed away. I went about my browsing. A few minutes later, here she comes again, this time with an actual store employee in tow saying, "That's her. That's the one that won't help me." The employee, actually a department manager, asked me why I was out of my department, and that I knew better than to not help a customer while approached. She then asked what department I was from. Finally, a chance to speak. I replied, "I sell shoes at," where I was promptly interrupted and given another tongue lashing, all while Rich Witch is sitting there with a smirk on her face. Manager told me to go to the office and wait for her. I turned on my heel and walked my way towards the exit doors instead. She catches up to me and loudly demands to know if I wanted to be fired or if I was going to go to the office. I responded, "I'm going to my office." She said there were no offices in that direction and demanded I turn in my name tag and gather my things. I took my name badge off, handed it to them while saying, "I don't think my district manager is going to like you firing this top-selling store manager from Kinney Shoes." She looked down at the name badge and back up at me, white as a sheet. Manager hands my badge back, mumbled an apology, and scurried away with her embarrassment and this rich witch. There's a lesson in this. Take your name badge off when you're on a break and go to other stores. While at my aunt's funeral, I was wearing my black suit. Hair was looking presentable, but my shoes were two different sizes and brands. Apparently, I looked like I worked at that funeral home. Probably because I was standing off to the side because I only knew 3 out of the 50 people there, including my aunt. Anyway, I was asked at least twice if I worked there or where this thing was by, who else, family members I'd never met. They thought it was funny after I told them. I still don't know who they are. I was in Normandy, France at one of the landing beaches and some American tourists thought I was a tour guide. Me, being the kind of person I am, went along with it and started teaching them about the beach's history and telling them good places to visit. I'd only been there for an hour, but I did know the history rather well. I continued talking to them through the landing and taking questions, and then the tour guide turned up. I just laughed and walked away, and they thanked me in a confused manner. I don't think it dawned on them at that precise moment I was a random guy and not a tour guide. This has happened to me more than once. When I was a paramedic, I'd just finished my shift and popped into the grocery store to grab something quick for dinner breakfast. Apparently, an older woman's eyesight was off that day because she thought I worked there. Grocery store employees don't dress at all like a paramedic, but whatever. I helped her load a few frozen chickens into her cart. She thanked me profusely and wanted to get my name so she could tell my manager what a great employee I am. So I gave her the name and number of my supervisor. The next Monday, my supervisor calls me into his office and asked me to explain this voicemail. "Hello, my name is Old Woman. I just wanted to say that you have one of the finest employees in the entire grocery store. He helped me load all the chickens I needed for my potluck into my cart immediately and without hesitation. He was so kind and generous with his time and blah blah blah." His voicemail actually cut her off. The message was so long, so she called back and left a second voicemail just to finish her praise. My supervisor just stared at me. I stared back. We never spoke of it again. I think he was of the opinion that I was moonlighting as some sort of grocery store chicken-loading demigod. What companies have lost your business forever? Bank of America. Loyal customer for 10 years. Insulted time and time again. First with their bullcrap service fee for monthly auto-pay transactions, Then I had to get a replacement debit card, which took way too long. I called to check on it, and a woman on the line said they'd never sent one out. So, very annoyed, I got another one. This card finally came, and I went to ATM to activate it, and it didn't work. Called back, and apparently this was the first card I'd ordered, which was now rendered useless because the second card, which was still in the mail, was now associated with my account. Got very irate, but remained polite with the woman on the line and was basically told there was nothing they could do. Still stuck with them. Fast forward to a different state a few months later. I got a call and I was told my account had been compromised. Was given some vague explanation about mass data theft, but basically told they had to deactivate my card and send me a new one. I told them how inconvenient this was, and they suggest I go to a branch to get a new card. I do this, and they say since my account was opened in a different state, they can't give me a temp card, and that I have to wait 5 to 7 business days again. Woman at the branch is nice and enters my new address, then calls the branch in Texas to get them to send me a new card. 5 to 7 days, no card. Call and find out that the card was sent to my old address in Texas because my address hasn't been updated, which is total bullcrap. I lose it. I don't scream, but I do ask her several pointed questions including, when is this company going to get its crap together? Which resulted in the rep acting as though I was the worst person in the world for swearing whilst frustrated and threatening to hang up. I apologize for swearing and then ask what they can do. Again, I'm basically told, tough crap, and that she can send me a new card and I can wait without one for another 5 to 7 days. I pause, think about it for 3 solid seconds and say, close my account, I'm done with your company. Short story? F Bank of America. HP. When my laptop was having overheating problems, the woman on the customer service line fricking lied and said my warranty had expired, even though I had multiple pieces of evidence showing that I had about a month left on my warranty. They were going to charge me $250 to fix the problem. I had to spend hours on the phone with various customer service associates just to get them to resolve the warranty issue. Luckily, I ended up fixing the overheating without shipping out my laptop, but still, F HP. I really like my laptop, but I'm never buying anything from them again after the bullcrap treatment I got. Currently on my HP, it can fry an egg because it gets so overheated. Also, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner built for a squirrel because of the fan. This story is 11 years old and we don't know if HP have got better, but I can testify that my first PC from them was met with a similar level of customer service, namely telling me to try the same update that had disabled my PC's audio every prior time I'd installed it to fix my freezing problem. PayPal, because they almost managed to mess up my overseas vacation. Long story short, at the time, still, they flagged and locked your account if you tried using their service in a different country than the one your verified address is located in. Fine. Banks sometimes do that too if you don't warn them you're traveling in advance. Where PayPal failed is in their unblocking process. You needed to input a secret code sent to either your verified phone or your verified address, both of which were inaccessible to me because I was halfway around the fricking world. Priceline.com, because 45 minutes away from the airport is not an airport area hotel. I avoid PayPal whenever possible, but it's hard to when a lot of online stores don't take anything else. A guy bought my PS2 and kept telling me to tell him when the PS2 was on its way. I sent the PS2 and updated the buyer. He immediately filed an unauthorized PayPal transaction dispute, which basically means he claimed that someone used his PayPal account without his permission, so he wanted his money returned. I explained what happened. I had the email conversation with the scammer saved and I had a postage receipt, but PayPal wouldn't have any of it. Fortunately, I never post anything until the money is in my bank account, so I didn't lose anything. My PayPal account remained locked, and they wanted me to repay them for refunding the scammer. Yeah, right. Now I just use my girlfriend's account when they're the only payment option. GameStop. They just cannot compete with Steam or GOG.com for PC games. GameStop sucks, but for console games and hardware, you can get it all early if the manager knows how to work the company and will for you. Free 7 days on used games. I beat the game in 7 days and then return it, though I suppose it isn't giving them great business. Best Buy. When an object on sale rung up at the wrong price, I asked them to change it to what the shelf said. The cashier said she couldn't, so I asked her to call the manager to change it then. The manager came over and said, "That's the price." I said, "Well, let's walk over to the shelf and I'll show you the posted price." He said, "No, and we don't want your business." So I got mad and asked for the senior manager, at which point he told the cashier to call the police. I was like, I've done nothing wrong, call them. They came and were like, yeah, he's a complete butthole, but he did ask you to leave, and if you don't, you're trespassing. So I asked the cop for his contact info and then contacted Best Buy Corporate and explained it, provided the manager's name and cop's name, and they sent me a $200 gift card as an apology, but I was done with Best Buy. I gave it to a family member for Christmas, since this happened a couple of weeks before Christmas a few years ago. They were very pleased. Burger King. Almost every time I've gotten food poisoning in my life, it's been from BK. I've had crap service many times as well, but the final straw was that I wanted the spicy chicken sandwich thing with extra sauce on it. The last couple of times, there was barely any of the spicy orange sauce on it. I opened the box it was in, and the fricking thing was swimming with the sauce. Not just extra sauce, but the sandwich was a soggy mess of chicken, bun, and sauce. It was completely inedible. I complained to the manager and he said, well, you wanted extra sauce. F you. Sony. Not because of stupid hacking, because they used to be a great engineering company, and then sold out and got into music and movie creation. They started to hobble their devices. Then, they put rootkits on their CDs. They became complete scum. AT&T. I was told I could have UVerse high-speed internet in my apartment. They ship me a router. I leave everything in the box and wait for the installer to get there because I have a funny feeling, which turned out to be correct. The installer shows up, informs me the lines haven't been updated and I can't get UVerse. Disappointed, I take the prepaid UPS sticker out of the box they shipped me, slap it on the box, tape it back up and ship it back. A month later, I get a bill in the mail for the router. I call and spend a lot of time confirming they indeed got the router and was assured the billing system just hadn't been caught up yet. So I thought it was over. Nope. Months later, I start getting calls from a collection company. AT&T sold my debt to them. I spend more time, oodles of time, telling them that they have the damn router and to call off their hired goons. Ended up sending the goons a certified letter to cease and desist. Everything was quiet. I thought it was over. Nope. A few months later, I start getting calls and letters from another collection agency. Collection agency number 1 sold it to a different collection agency. This time I pitch a fit. I call AT&T. I tweet AT&T reps on Twitter. I raise a heck of a stink, and finally, the calls stop. I think it's over. Nope! I start getting collection letters for $14. Apparently they took off the $89 to $100 for the router they'd been wanting to charge me, but still wanted me to pay the fee the collection agency tacks on to make the debt worth their while. So I call AT&T and they have the fricking nerve to say they'll have to investigate and see if I owe the fee or not. God. Needless to say, I spent many hours on this over the year and I'll never get that back. AT&T, go F yourselves, forever, in the dark with a chainsaw. There was a pizza place near my campus. The middle-aged owner was always there hitting on drunken girls late at night. While that didn't bother me, what did was that any time I tried to order, he brushed me off, like I was distracting him from his flirting. Very rude and arrogant. His employee was incredibly nice and served me. But the fact that it happened more than once, and the fact that there are 3 more pizza places on the same block, well, screw that guy. I mean, I'm more annoyed at the implication of a sober, dirty old man hitting on inebriated girls, but hey, you get teed off by what tees you off, my dude. Canadian here. Rogers, based on many bad experiences and principle. Bell, on principle alone. Quiznos. So, had a coupon for a free sub. I ordered it, and they wouldn't validate the damn thing. Apparently Kellogg's or whatever cereal I got the coupon from did it without their permission, which I find really hard to believe. Anyway, I was starving and they'd made me the sandwich, and I felt guilty, so I paid for the darn thing, even though I was broke and it was like $10 fricking dollars. It was burnt, just a mess of bread and sauce and crap all over, and just straight up fricking disgusting. I don't know how anyone can stand them, I was so mad. Went back just to meet my sister a few days later though, and she had ordered a drink already. Free refills. So we just hung out there, shared the drink and refilled it like 20 times. Vengeance. Not really, I'll never go back. Air France. What a shower of rude and incompetent, snobby jerks in general. I was stuck in Paris 2 years ago at Christmas because of snow. They had nobody working the desks anywhere. They booked me into a hotel room that didn't exist, so I left the warm departure lounge for the freezing entrance. A member of staff told me to F off when I asked when the customer service desk would open, and they literally had one check-in desk open to deal with all the rearranged flights in their own fricking airport. They then lost my luggage for the whole 3 weeks I was home and refused any compensation claim. Oh yeah, and the morons will speak French to you on a Paris to Tokyo flight and be angry when you need to switch to English. So I started replying in Japanese, ya funny boys. Ulta. Too many snobs. God, me too. I found a great price on an epilator at Ulta online. Went to the store and found it was $25 more expensive. Asked the sales girl about it and she stood there seriously for about 5 minutes, scratching her head and being all, "Oh my god, that's so weird, I can't believe, it's a different price. How weird is that? It's so random, oh my god." I had to actually walk away and find someone who looked less stupid, but couldn't find anyone, so left and I bought the epilator at Target instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not exactly relevant anymore since they closed down years ago, but before that point, Circuit City. I've had 2 horrible experiences with them, and after the second time, I swore to never go back there again. Shortly after the GameCube came out, I was searching all around town for one. I called them up and they said they had a whole bunch in stock. We drove over there, about a 10-minute drive, and not only did they not have any, they hadn't had any for days and wouldn't be getting any for several more days. The day Xenosaga Episode 3 came out, I walked around town to try and find a copy. Circuit City said they had a few copies, and they'd save one for me. We took that same 10-minute drive out there, and I find the guy I spoke with and he opens a drawer and pulls out Xenosaga Episode 2. I tell him, no, I wanted Episode 3. His reply, this is 3. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. That's 2. Whatever, man, it's the same thing anyway, right? So are you gonna buy it? No, I'm looking for 3. I have 2. But this is the same thing? You're an idiot. And so I left, never to return. Dell. 4 years ago, I had some expensive Dell XPS laptop that started getting randomly hot, so I called Dell's customer support. They tell me nothing is wrong, then hang up on me. A few weeks later, my laptop won't turn on. I call customer support again, but this time they send someone out to look at the laptop. The motherboard was cracked, so they just replace it, but the laptop was still getting really hot. 14-year-old me thinks that the fans are broken, shocker, right? But they insist that nothing is wrong. Long story short, they end up replacing my motherboard, RAM, and hard drive over the next few visits, but they still insist the laptop just gets hot. At this point, it's not the same laptop, so I keep asking Dell for a new one, since this one just doesn't work. They won't replace it, but my mum finds out where I live. Dell has been sued and lost multiple times for using faulty parts and so on. We bring that up, and a few weeks later there's a $4,500 Alienware laptop sitting at my door that they sent me for free. My friend still wonders why I tell him to never buy from Dell and just offer to help them build their own PCs instead. Walmart. I don't hate capitalism or large corporations, but Walmart represents everything that is wrong with American capitalism and corporate culture. Yeah, this would be my answer too. There are so many things wrong with it that I can't even point out which is most important. They treat their workers horribly, their customers horribly, they do illegal crap overseas and use sweatshops to make their prices so low. They put smaller companies out of business and ruin livelihoods in the process. And they mess up the economy so that it has to rely on all these horrible facets. They're terrible on every level. I can't boycott every company that does anything wrong, but holy crap, if you're gonna pick one to boycott, it should be this one. It doesn't cover the same issues, just the symptoms, but feel free to enjoy our old video, Store Workers and Customers, What's Your People of Walmart Story, on this channel to hear what this mega corporation turns people into. Capital One. They kept losing my payments, my online payments, so I'm not sure how you can lose those. 100 times this. Years ago, I had a credit card with them. It had a balance of around $600. I called to let them know I was canceling it. I planned to pay it off over a few months at $150 a month. At the time, I was reasonably well off, so I paid most of my bills on autopilot. After 9 months, I realized I was still paying it off, and that didn't make sense. I checked my balance. With no new charges and paying $150 a month, my balance was now over $1,000. I called them and went through all kinds of people before I found out what was happening. They had literally made up charges on my account. I knew the charges were fake because I'd already cancelled the card. These fake charges were putting me repeatedly over my limit, with a $40 over-limit charge each time this happened. Once I realized this and threatened legal action, they realized it was a computer error, and that your account is fine. They apologized for the mistake, and I thought I was done with it. 10 years later, I started getting calls trying to collect on a $1,500 balance. Whenever I get such a call, I simply tell them, that account was paid in full and on time and you have been defrauded. I generally don't hear anything for about a year at a time now. Target Photo Center. They had an ad that when you sign up, you got 50 free prints. So I made an account and ordered 50 pictures for my 21-year-old cousin's funeral picture board. I show up and the trashy lady tried to charge me for all the prints. When I ask to see a manager, she just laughs and walks away. And it wasn't the first time I had a bad experience there. Apple. I work in IT, so I will never understand paying more money for less functionality, less hardware flexibility, and proprietary connectors. Nexon. As for gaming, worst company I have ever bought virtual points for. I spent about $600 in 2 years for that game, and their customer service was pretty much non-existent. You'd send a complaint, a ticket, and you'd get an immediate response, "We're busy, we may not get to your ticket for a while." And 6 months later you'd get a response, but nothing would be accomplished. So you'd send another complaint, and it's just a horrible experience. 0 out of 10 would never buy from again. Nikon. I got one of their PowerShot cameras and I had it for about 8 months. I didn't get it wet, I didn't drop it. Basically, I kept it in ideal condition, but the LCD screen still broke. So I sent it to them just to have it fixed. Keep in mind it was still under warranty, so repairs should have been free. A few weeks later they sent me an email that basically said, "Yeah, we'll fix it." For $100. Hell no! That was almost half the price of the camera. Switched back to Canon and haven't looked back. After watching Food Inc., I haven't bought one Tyson product. It's been nearly 2 years and I've continued to buy free-range and as much organic stuff as I can. Coming from someone who makes minimum wage, it's hard to afford, but I refuse to support crap companies like Tyson. Their plant, anti-union bias, active recruiting in poverty-stricken countries, and pollution have ruined my hometown. You can smell my town 15 miles away. What makes me more mad, though, is how my hometown bent over backward to accommodate them. Lexington, Nebraska is run by the "money? Yes" idea of government, and it leads to a smelly, broke, corrupt as crap rural Nebraskan town. Lenovo. Like a month ago, I ordered a laptop with them. Due to finding a better deal online, I decided to purchase a different laptop. Before I spent the money, I cancelled the order with Lenovo. Unlike something like Amazon where you can cancel it online, I had to call and I had to talk with someone who I could barely understand. Thick foreign accent. 45 minutes later, I thought I'd cancelled the order. The man told me it would take 3 to 5 days and they'd send me an email. 7 days later, I got the email. Another 4 days after that, and I was charged the $800 for the laptop, despite only having $500 in my account, overdrafting 3 pending purchases. Another 2 hours on the phone with my bank and Lenovo, and I was promised a full refund within 24 to 48 hours. Those passed and nothing happened. I called again and they said the order had already shipped. It shipped weeks after I cancelled the order? So I had to wait until it arrived and refuse the order. Today, a week or so after that, and I've still got nothing in my account, despite them continually saying like within 3 business days and in 24 hours. I still don't have any money, but Wells Fargo is on my side at least. In summary, screw Lenovo. They charged me for an order since it shipped over a week after I cancelled it, and have taken 3 weeks and still haven't given me back the money I desperately need and have incurred about $100 of fees due to overdrafts on. Well, since I've already complained about HP, I'll say that in my one instance of complaint to Lenovo, they were a lot better about it and refunded. But then again, their crappy laptop had electrocuted me, so maybe they got off easy for that. VMware. I purchased an academic license of Workstation 9 from them, and I needed another for my other computer. It's only a per-computer license. Nowhere on the academic site did it say you could only buy one academic copy. Their website errored out on purchase, telling me that my email address was already registered when I tried to buy the second license for Workstation while already logged in. I contacted support, and after a month of runaround and my pointing out that I had an academic project coming due that required the second license, they told me that I could only get one academic license for Workstation, which was stated nowhere on their site. I then requested my support ticket to be escalated due to them giving me the runaround, and they suggested using an alternate email to purchase the software. You need an EDU email to get the academic version, and it's kind of hard to get a second EDU email. I'm not dealing with their bullcrap anymore, not after that one. If they wanted to say you can only buy one copy of Workstation on academic license within even the first week of the ticket, that's one thing, but to mess me around for a month while I have academic work coming due that requires the second license and then give me the bird after a month of messing me around, screw them. Business in Australia called Harvey Norman's. I'll never shop there because the guy who runs it, Jerry Harvey, is a huge whiner who always wants the government to tax this or ban that because his business is hard to run in the current economic conditions. It's called capitalism, mate. Just because you had some boom times doesn't mean it'll last forever. Adapt or die.
Sears. While working there for a year and a half, I came to the conclusion that they don't care about their customers or their employees. Those are great examples of how they like to mess over everyone. I hated working there, and I can't believe the one I worked at is still open. We'd have 5 customers all night, and then managers would yell at us for not getting 5 people to join the rewards program or get a credit card. They told us to lie about the rewards program and to sign people up without them knowing. They wanted us to ask for their phone numbers and emails and sign them up without telling them why. It was so stressful. A woman had been working there for 25-ish years and was only making 9-something an hour. I was sick of going home and crying every night, and I was sick of being threatened with losing my job. Before I quit, my manager informed me that the store manager did not want me there. I worked hard and I was great with customers, but I wouldn't lie or sweet-talk people into something they really didn't want, so they drove me to quit.
What be some of the strangest things about life on the high seas?
Things can get much heavier quickly because the floor is moving. Machinery running within steel walls will destroy your hearing, and fire is very, very scary. The most dangerous thing out there, weirdly. In the case of the US Navy, we had a dedicated at-sea fire party. This was made up of damage control men and hull technicians. We would be the first responders in any sort of fire, flooding, or toxic gas situations, including reactor emergencies. We would fight the fire until we either A, put it out, or B, it would get out of control and the ship would then go into general quarters, battle stations. Then the rest of the crew would meet in their predetermined areas and help fight the fire or flooding. The ship is broken into sections that have repair lockers, think mini fire stations, with all the equipment to fight. When the fire is initially called away, the fire party will respond to the closest repair locker and then gear up and move out from there. In a GQ scenario, each repair locker is manned by the entire crew. Every few feet in the ship, on every deck and level, is a fire plug with a hose and nozzles. The hoses are fed by seawater that we've pumped in and loops at a constant 150 psi. The ship is designed in a manner that sections can be closed off with watertight doors and fire-tight doors. That way, you can keep it isolated. In the case that the fire is burning so intensely that we can't make entry to actually fight the fire, you'd go into the compartment above or below or next to and spray the decks or overhead to try and keep the heat from becoming so intense that it lights off another fire. As a hull technician, I did extensive training both before the fleet and during the fleet. On the ship, the fire party trains and runs drills several times a week, and the GQ drill at least once a week in my cases. In the fire party, we have all of our positions that we know to go to immediately, like nozzle man, team leader, scene leader, plug man, plotter, etc. The main thing is don't let fires happen. It's the #1 killer for us out there, so a lot of time and effort goes into prevention. In conclusion, put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. When you get off the boat, you don't actually feel off the boat for sometimes a week. Vertigo is real nasty. I never got seasick ever. My first time being on a boat was for a month. Then getting off in Portugal, I got land sick. It was a bummer. Trying to compensate for waves that don't exist, my father made his living back in the day repairing old fishing ships for recreational use, so I spent a lot of time at sea. I've fallen out of the shower at home after being out for a few months. You get used to the ship rolling and your body adapts and sways to compensate. When you're back on land, it can take a few days to reorient yourself. You can be showering and not realize you're swaying. Before you know it, you're on your butt with the shower curtain wrapped around you and a bump on your head from the curtain rod. As a man who can trip over on an unimpeded straight walk with no help from vertigo, the narrator is beginning to think he should never ever go on a long voyage. I've always slept better at sea. I think the rolling of the ship has something to do with it. I always enjoyed the rough weather. Everyone seems to be in a better, cooperative mood due to the shared experience, like how neighbors all pull together in a big snowstorm. I spent a lot of my childhood at sea with my dad, and one thing I always remember about sleeping on the water is the sound of barnacles.
My bunk was right up in the bow and right against the hull at water level, and you could hear them eating at night. To those who haven't heard it, they snap their beak things closed when they catch plankton, or at least that's what I assumed was happening. And there's like 1 billion of these things living on the outside of the boat, so you can hear this constant multitude of faint clicks, almost like rain. It's a soothing noise. I miss it.
That sounds both so gross and so soothing.
You can become very disoriented from being surrounded by nothing but water. You get to see so much of the world, but 70% of it is water. We joined the Navy to see the world, and what did we see? We saw the sea. If you wanted to join the other 30%, you should have joined the Army like a real man. The constant movement. Plus, if you're standing watches, you never get enough steady sleep, and you're only half there after 2 or 3 days. You'll find yourself dozing off on your feet. Also, when you eat, keep a hand on your plate.
Probably how beautiful the stars are and how frightening the sea gets during a storm.
The only time I've ever really seen the Milky Way was in the open ocean at night. We were going back to our rental house in the Bahamas. I was about 14 and had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't understand when my sister told me it was the Milky Way, but it made a huge impression on me. Electronic communications technician here, aboard a submarine. I control all the information going on or off our boat. I establish secure communication with satellites and other ships. I love it, and I wouldn't want to do any other job in the Navy. Getting fresh fruit and vegetables is very rare. Going months without sunlight screws with your head, but your body still knows when it's time to go to bed anyway. We make our own water and air, but from time to time we'll come to the surface for some fresh air. At that point, no one can sleep because the O2 levels just shot up. The ocean is bigger and deeper than you think. It's amazing how much contrast the water has from port to port. The blue water in the Pacific is unlike anything I've ever seen on TV or in magazines. It's beautiful and vast. You have to see it from the deck of a submarine to grasp it.
So, when there's a storm, how far underwater are the effects of it seen? For that matter, is there ever turbulence of any kind from things like currents or thermoclines?
It depends on how bad the sea state is. I've been pretty deep under a bad storm and we were rocking a bit. We try to go around what we can if they're really bad. Kind of a different perspective here. I served in the US Navy for some time aboard an aircraft carrier. Fresh water is a precious resource, so showers are a bit different. You don't get in and stand under running water. It's essentially a hose with a button on the side of the nozzle. The steps for taking a shower are as follows. 1. Get wet. 2. Soap and wash. 3. Rinse. You work 12 hours, then 12 hours off. It's a loud environment and the ship shakes and shudders often during flight operations. Sometimes to get from point A to point B on the ship requires going up and down several ladders or stairs. My dad is the captain of a 4-story tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico. They putter along at 2 to 6 knots from Brownsville to somewhere in Florida and anywhere in between, pushing up to, I think, 12 or 20 barges. He spends 2 weeks on the ship and 1 week off. He hates it. His deckhands play video games and watch cartoons in the galley. If anything, he probably enjoys yelling when that happens. He has to wake up at noon, sleep at 6 p.m., wake back up at midnight, and go back to sleep by 6 a.m. This is so a relief captain can take over for half of the day. That order reverses on the second week. Deckhands cook the food. The only good food they can make is Neiman Marcus cake, which is very rich. He's home now for a week. I'd get him on Reddit to tell his stories in his own words, but he refuses to get on here. He'd rather get his news from the television. Point is, he hates working on that ship, but that's all he knows how to do. When you start off on a boat, you're a deckhand. You're the captain's whipping boy. You'll run many miles a day on a ship with wet-painted steel floors. Be expected to lift 100 pounds straight up 8 feet, no problem. Chance of man overboard. Pays very well, and you can get a job as a deckhand almost any time with no experience. There you go. If narration ever fails me, I can follow the call of the sea, lift 100 pounds several times a day, break my back, and fall overboard. That's the life. Royal Navy here. I love the fact that on the upper deck of one's ship, looking out to sea, you're seeing what sailors 100, 200, 500, and 1,000 years ago saw. The exact same. Now go to a Roman ruin and look at it. That's not what they saw. I love that, even though it's just waves and stuff. I worked on a cruise ship for a year. There are many things that I could mention. Most likely that you'll have no windows in your room. This is quite disorienting if you feel movement all the time but can't see what's going on. Internet is spotty and expensive. The ship moves, sometimes a lot. There are seriously passengers who don't understand this tiny fact. Everything can be dangerous. As the first guy said, fire is the main enemy of a ship. People all train constantly for disasters when they work and live at sea. This training could be hit or miss, but every bigger ship has the systems in place to save lives if something happens. But not just for fire, trainings are held for bombs, evacuation, and other things. That said, everything is beautiful. Life is basically full of beautiful sunsets and sunrises, and amazing beaches and cultures in between. Your shipmates will have interesting and crazy lives that you will learn about intimately, whether you want to or not. Life at sea is obviously vastly different for someone sailing a small boat than for someone working as one of an 800 crew member on a cruise ship, but I do highly recommend doing it if you have the opportunity. I loved it. The stress from being out there alone, working in harsh conditions with the same people over and over every day. Some people got into fistfights, some people were just so agitated they wanted to be left alone, but a lot of us made jokes and tried to have fun. My favorite part was going out into the middle of the night and seeing all the stars. So many stars with no artificial lights to block them. And when we went to Alaska, we saw the northern lights. It was amazing to see the lights reflected off the water. I had pictures, but my camera was stolen. I was in the Navy and life at sea had become very routine. We were at sea for almost 3 months straight during a deployment. We, most of us, had standard working hours during the day. The guys in the engine room were 6 hours on, 6 off. We stood watch, ate, watched movies, and did whatever else we could to stay busy. Other than drills and actual emergencies, not much changes day to day. I always enjoyed smoking cigarettes at night. The smoke boxes, as we called them, were one of the only places we could be outside at night. Navy ships run dark at night with no outside lights or white lights above the main deck. The smell of the ocean, the sound of the ship moving through the water, and the stars in the sky was something that I'll never forget. It was a different lifestyle that I really fell in love with. Yeah, parts of it sucked, but it sure beats sitting in a cubicle all day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've done a couple of hitches on a traditional Arctic schooner. The concept of privacy is very different. In some cases, the only personal space you have is a 6-foot by 3-foot bunk for sleeping in and storing all your stuff. So you get very close to the people around you, otherwise it's miserable. You also get used to there being no real free time. Your schedule is usually 6 hours on and 6 hours off, so you have limited time to eat and sleep before your next watch. Also, fresh water is only for drinking, so you take a lot of deck baths despite how cold it is. But it's also beautiful out there on the water. I've gotten to hear a whale song through the boards of my bunk as well as above the water. I've seen humpback whales breaching only 50 feet away from me during bow watch. It's an experience that very little can match. I found it interesting that after a few days, sea salt starts congealing on everything, even though you can't see ocean spray hitting it. The rain is nice because it cleans it off and you can sit down or hold railings without getting salt all over you for a few days. Time can get monotonous. You become like a dog, in that you look forward to lunch and dinner because that's about the most exciting part of the day. Your ratio of sunsets watched will skyrocket because after dinner you don't have anything to do really but smoke cigs and shoot the crap while watching the sunset. They're pretty amazing though, better than their land counterparts. Also, the stars at night. I've seen the Milky Way so bright that it was reflecting off the ocean. It's worth noting that experiences of working at sea will differ greatly, depending on what kind of vessel you're on, your position, rank, where you operate, and how long you spend away from home. I'd say it's the latter that most people will agree on, being away from home. This will vary from 4 months to 10 months a year for people. I do approximately 8 months away a year, 2 to 3 month contracts. Spending a large proportion of your time away from friends and family will change your life. You'll lose touch with people, relationships will be tough, and there's going to be a majority chance that you'll miss any wedding, funeral, or holiday. But those are the terms and conditions we all signed up for knowing this, although maybe not understanding it fully. As a trade, we do get benefits which one needs to decide themselves if they outweigh the negatives. Maybe not answering the question, but it's just my 2 cents. Of course, this time away would be a massive factor. Part of me wonders if it would have been worth it to do this for a few years immediately after I'd left high school to save up some money before uni, but there might be better options for gaining other skills too. Guys from the third world make up the majority of seafarers on UK-flagged ships, so most ship owners can cut costs. They're penny pinchers. 95% of all trade is done by sea. Most ships don't have internet, so it can be isolating. Most UK ships tend not to be registered in the UK for this reason. 90% of vessels I served on were registered in the Bahamas. You tickle your pickle any chance of solitude you get.
Thus the main reason to keep those shower shoes handy.
If you're on a smallish boat, how difficult day-to-day tasks can get. Making a cup of coffee in the galley without a window or small porthole in rough seas can be quite the challenge. Pouring anything with liquid in the galley is very, very difficult. It's just so easy to get everything everywhere. Try getting dressed in cramped quarters constantly being buffeted from one side to the other. Or taking a crap or a pee, you'll have to watch the level in the toilet and flush before it runs over the edge onto you in a rogue wave. The intimacy on board on most boats, there's very little privacy. You live with your crew every waking moment. You have to be very comfortable with yourself and not be easily bothered. Going upstairs in high seas is a real crapshoot. One second you feel like you weigh 3 times as much as usual, and then the next second you're lighter than air. Sea legs don't tend to disappear. I've been off the ship for about 6 years now, and I still walk with a swagger, apparently. Sleeping in high seas is nigh impossible. You'll flop about with the ship, and starfishing doesn't help after Force 10. Polish sailors will drink anything. Filipino sailors will hide everything everywhere. They also love singing Sinatra on karaoke. Often the cook is also a deckhand, so if it's been a busy day, prepare for crap food. Cargo watch sucks, deck watch sucks, it all sucks. Cue the gay jokes. Fresh milk is more important than nicotine for keeping the crew and officers from killing each other. The chief officer will always drink, even on a dry ship. A ship doesn't normally dictate its culture, the captain does. A crappy captain is crappy for everyone. Testing lifeboats is fun, getting an infection is not. Day trippers are fricking morons who don't follow the rules of the road. I'm not moving? Oh really? I've got 9,000 tons of steel and 4,500 bhp that says differently. Counting lighthouse flashes is quite fun. Anchor watch is the best. You sit on the bridge and you read and you smoke. You'll hear a lot of gay jokes. Sunny FM is the best place in the world. Duty-free cigs, booze, adult magazines, and knives. That's it. 5 litres of vodka, €3. 200 Marlboro, €2. German dungeon smut, 3 for 99 cents. Basically, money. I come from 6 generations of seamen, all with the same goal in life. Catch fish, sell them, get drunk, and get laid. Maybe not work, but I've spent more time on water than most. I've spent a year on my sailboat sailing down from Vancouver to Mexico and then cruising in Mexico for 6 months, most of it single-handed. It's not all sunshine and beer. When you're out there and things start to suck, it's not like you can go home. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, seafarers were idolized because everyone knew someone close that went to sea for a living. There was more understanding of what the working conditions were like among the general population. Now, people that go to sea are in a huge minority. People don't know anymore what it's like out there at sea. You don't know the bone-chilling cold there is at night in the North Pacific before the continental shelf drops. Hint, it pushes cold water up from the bottom of the sea to the top. You don't know what it's like to be out there in 12-foot sea with less than 6-second periods. That freaking sucks. You don't know what it's like to have monster waves at night that you can't see until they're right on top of you. You don't know what it's like to be in a shipping lane at night in the fog without radar. Yes, I'm stupid for that last one. But there's nothing so freeing as being alone out on deck on dog watch on a cold night with your cheeks cold and your nose slightly stuffed from watching the stars play in the night sky. Your only steering guide, the red-lit compass in front of you. But being out there on deck, slightly cold steering ship at night and seeing the stars dissolve into dawn is an amazing sight. I'd trade many a stormy night for that experience. Then there's also the relief of finally coming into harbour after an insane storm when everything is wet. You, your gear, your sleeping bag, your bunk, the whole boat. The feeling when you tie up, everyone gets their wet gear off and you sit in the saloon and make dinner while everyone is sore and tired. Arr. The feeling of seeing land for the first time in a long time. Approaching an island or a coastline doesn't look populated at all, just indescribably beautiful and innocent. Once you're within a mile or so, humanity and the scope of it takes over. Ah yes, the beautiful world, an accident of cosmic proportions or the hand of some divine being in all its glory, laid out for your own eye. Oh crap, there are the people. Damn. The shower water can be really hard and it will dry out your skin. Also, if you get hurt or family problems, toothache, or any other unplanned reason you need to get back to the beach, it can take hours to mobilize a chopper to get you. Then the travel time out could be hours and then back again. I work as an instruments technician on a production platform. The work is generally pretty easy, but sometimes it can be stressful and difficult at times. For example, working on big equipment with heavy wrenches, working with government inspectors, working in 90 degrees Fahrenheit plus 90% humidity in direct sunlight in your FRC overalls. You're working on equipment that if it fails can kill people or cause millions of dollars in deferred production. The work schedule is 14 on and 14 off as well. We're a lucky platform as we have two-man rooms, bunks, with our own bathroom as well. It's like a little hotel. We have satellite TV and Wi-Fi on the platform. I'm offshore right now. The funniest part is working and living with the same 50 guys every 2 weeks. They become your other family and your best friends. The food ranges from terrible to decent depending on the cook and how far away from the last food delivery you are. No beer or booze allowed. Dangers? Lots. Mostly from the process. Flammable hydrocarbons under pressure and physical dangers, falling from high places and crap falling on you. Much less chemical dangers than working at a refinery or chemical plant though. I don't like it that much. Being away from my significant other and daughter sucks, but the ratio of what I get paid to the actual amount of work I do is kind of silly. If I could find a land job that paid this much, I'd do it, but I'm making $120K plus now. I was on a carrier and a couple of things come to mind. 1. Life at sea is like the movie Groundhog Day. It's literally the same thing day in and day out, but every now and then you'll hit a port and go have a blast. 2. Don't be the dirty guy. Most sailors have to live in small compartments with upwards of 80 or so other people. Take a shower and change your sheets. 3. A person that you normally wouldn't be attracted to will eventually look like a supermodel the longer you're out at sea. It's a condition called boat goggles, and can only be cured by a port visit. 4. You work with people you like and quite a few that you hate, but if anyone needs your help, you give it without question because you're all alone out there. 5. Find a way to break the monotony. Many people work out, play cards, and take classes. I took 3 college classes while out at sea, just had to pay for the books. It helped me out when I left the Navy for college. I served on board a very small, independently deployed US Navy ship for almost 5 years. Just adding to what I read. We became a family. The old man was our dad, the XO was our nagging mum. We spent long nights up on watch, talking about some of the most intimate stuff guys can talk about. I'm a New Yorker and I got to spend quality time with Mormons, rednecks from Georgia, brothers from Mississippi, weirdos from Cali, Filipinos, etc. As those times got further in my rearview mirror, I got out like 15 years ago, and that's what I think I miss the most. Never thought I'd miss the balls to four and the crappy coffee.
Teachers, what's the funniest thing to come out of one of your students' mouths? My first grade class was learning the word powerful. Kids came up with examples of powerful things and people, like elephants and Superman. Then one boy said, "Babies are powerful because they can cry and get whatever they want." "Teacher, I need a pencil." "Where do the pencils live?" "I have a bucket of sharpened pencils for them to use." "Pennsylvania?" I'm a teacher in Canada, told the kids to name me 5 US states and their row could go out for recess first. A boy raised his hand and said, "Rattlesnake?" "What?" "Oh, snakes." "No, states. Name 5 states." T-bone?" "You're naming steaks." "States. States." Resource teacher was in the room and we were crying laughing. "Gas, liquid, solid, plasma, Bose-Einstein condensate." In 7th grade on a test, the question was, why do some people see technology as positive and others see the same technology as a problem? And a kid simply put, "Because some people are Amish?" I remember in year 3 we had to answer a logic question about why there might be uneven amounts of shoes at the door. I'd recently watched Titanic for the first time, so decided to write, "One person might be a one-legged working girl." It helped that my mum was a parent helper that day. I'm a white guy teaching ESL in Asia. My students were tasked to complete, "The old man's hair was as white as blank." One student asked if she could write down my name in that spot. Phys ed teacher here. I always wear shorts while teaching. Parent-teacher conferences roll around and a grade 1 student comes up to me with her parents. "Mr. Smith, I've never seen you wear pants before." I've never responded quicker to a comment before in my life to clear that up. Reminds me of when my wife worked in an undisclosed location women's shelter. My daughter wanted to see where mummy worked, but we could never go. I was picking up my daughter from school when she said, in the middle of the crowded school hall, "Daddy, can we finally go and visit mommy in the shelter?" This reminds me of my nephew when he was 3. We dropped his mom, my sister, off at work, where she met a colleague outside and went inside with him. Back at home, my nephew reported to everyone that he'd seen mommy go away with a man.
Context is a very important thing, but its removal can lead to all sorts of marvelous situations like this. I still enjoy it when someone introduces me, their game leader in Dungeons & Dragons, as their dungeon master in public, to many raised eyebrows. Teaching English to middle schoolers in Korea. I asked, okay, what's another way you can express surprise in English? After going over expressions like, no way, are you serious? Are you kidding me? One kid yells from the very back of the room, what the frick? I did the same thing when I was little and still not fluent in English. My teacher said, what phrases can you make with beat? She was looking for something like beat up or beat at. I was reading a lot of stuff in English on the internet and without thinking much said, beat the crap out of. So proud of such a long phrase I'd achieved. I was sent out of the class. ESL teacher. I had my students do an activity where they had to give directions based off a map and situations I'd chosen. The final question was more complex, and one of my students wrote, way too difficult, take a cab. On a 3rd grade Charlotte's Web quiz, give 2 pieces of evidence that support this statement. Charlotte was a good friend to Wilbur. The answer given was, she comforted him and didn't let him become pork. You know what I don't get about that story? Why is the pig the one who becomes famous? The real news is the fricking super genius spider who knows how to think critically and write in English. Who cares what it thinks about the pig? I want to know its thoughts on the origins of reality. An elementary school kid saw the answer key. He swore he'd come up with answers may vary all on his own. What's sad is we had to grade a first semester chemistry test once at university that was made for the medical students. I don't remember if the medical students were at first semester too. They took the test together with the first semester chemistry students but had an alternative version anyway. Thing is, the grading sheet with the right answers was leaked beforehand. One student wrote the correct answer down and then wrote 1 point for every correct formula underneath his answer. How do you finish school without walking in front of a car when you're that damn stupid? I asked a 3-year-old what love was for a Valentine's Day card to his parents. His response? Maybe love is what tornadoes need. We call him the professor because he teaches us new things every day. In nutrition class at community college, the teacher asks, what's one of the first things you throw out of the window when you drink booze? And this kid just mumbles, standards. A fellow student once answered, in the head, to the question, where was JFK shot? Instead of the intended answer of Dallas. I mean, he was also shot in his car. I've got a story from my fiancé's childhood. They were testing her intelligence or awareness and showed her an image with a TV in the room. The TV was turned on, showing a cartoon, and had a plant on top of it. The question was, what's on the television? The answer was, a plant. Apparently, she kept insisting in utter frustration until the administrator bothered to look at the image and not the answer sheet. Reminds me of a friend's story. I don't know about public schools, but for sure at private schools you get a little quiz-type test with a teacher before they confirm you're ready for kindergarten. One of the things he had to do was identify pictures. He aced the section except for the picture of the airplane. He looked and thought hard and then burst into tears saying, I don't know what that is. Turns out his dad worked for Boeing, and he was trying and failing to discern exactly what model plane the super generic picture was depicting. This is very cute, bless the little guy's heart. Probably trying to count the windows and work out whether it was a 737 or 747, coming up short for both. Why are you late? The bell went off before I got here. Why are you late? I had trouble with my bike. What was the trouble? I didn't get on it early enough. College professor teaching developmental psychology. At the end of the semester, I asked all the students to write down the most interesting or important thing they've learned. One wrote, babies are stupid and old people still do the deed. It's not wrong, kinda covers the lifespan. My dad used to coach basketball and was trying to get kids into a 2-3 zone. He yelled out to one kid in particular who was in man-to-man, what defense are we playing? The kid slaps the floor and says, tough defense. I teach forensic science. We were going to be using iodine to fume fingerprints. Iodine vapor is no joke, so I terrify the students and use only 2 volunteers with goggles and respirators at the chemical hood. But we still go over the MSDs, PPE, and equipment. I spend maybe 5 minutes talking about everything and the chemical hood to my class of 30. Towards the end, so someone tell me, what is a hood? A hand shot up. Yes, student. It's like the place where you grew up. I facepalm, the class laughs, and I'm unable to pivot his answer in the moment. He's on the spectrum and wasn't trying to be funny. This is intentional, but I teach a foreign language, so when I introduce the word for I don't know, I call on a student who typically gets answers wrong, and ask them to translate the word as if he or she should know it. When the student inevitably responds with, I don't know, I tell them they're right, and the look on their face is always priceless. In a class that deals with electricity, I asked the students to name a good conductor. They said Leonard Bernstein.
As a music teacher, this brings me great joy.
Asked what is the moral of the story in The Little Engine That Could, I got the answer,
don't pick up hitchhikers.
To refresh your memory, the engine had trouble getting up the hill because he had taken on several more passengers due to their train breaking down. What side of the road do people in France drive on?
Miss, they drive on both sides.
I'm not the teacher, but I witnessed this in class. Sociology professor asks, why do you conform? Student,
it's always been my goal in life to blend in.
Professor, no more questions for you. In German, there's this little drawing game called Das Haus vom Nikolaus, consisting of drawing a house without lifting the pen or drawing the same line twice. Well, the act of drawing something without lifting your pen is called in einem Zug zeichnen, which literally translates to drawing in a train. So yes, one kid actually drew a house in a train. Okay, kids, name something living.
A fox.
Name something non-living.
Fox crap. I wrote an exam where the question was, can you name the 3 models of DNA replication? She wrote, no.
I mean, that was bad question writing on your part. While something like name 3 types of DNA replication would still result in the student writing no, you should recognize that this would be equivalent to leaving the question blank with the original wording. It was a valid answer to your question. It's not a valid response to the above rewording. Makes me remember something I did when I was in grade 2. The student teacher took us into a private room one by one for eye exams. I've never taken an eye exam before, and it wasn't really explained to me what was happening. I was just sat down and asked to read the first line of the chart, then the second, then the third. By the time it came to the 4th line, I was like, it's too small for me to read. 1 minute, please. Then I got up, walked over to the board, and started reading the letters. Apparently, that's not how you do eye exams.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I teach English to Vietnamese kids. I asked, what is the population of Vietnam? The kid quickly surveyed the room and said, more than 15. This guy is going places. I can finally answer one of these. The student is reading a science magazine during a bit of downtime. Student,
whoa, yo, mister, you mean to tell me pollen is like a flower splooge?
Sort of.
Man, I be getting that crap in my face all the time.
Well, he's not wrong. Most of us are catching steaming floral loads to the face every day of spring. Some of us love it, and it makes others of us sick. Kind of like transmitted diseases. Fun thought. I asked my class, when is the time you've used integrity? My student answered,
I wash my hands after going to the bathroom, even though no one's there.
I don't think anyone I work with has any of this kind of integrity. Something my brother answered for homework. My brother was in year 1 and his homework was to draw a balloon blown up. He drew a picture with lots of squiggly shapes spread out across the paper. He took it as the balloon blown up, like a bomb, so he drew the leftovers of an exploded balloon. His teacher loved it and gave him full marks. Not a teacher, but a witness. In high school history class, the teacher asked,
what was the peace treaty that ended World War II?
This was a trick question because there wasn't a single treaty that ended the war, and this one kid blurted out,
the Manhattan Project.
The teacher laughed so hard that he went and got the other history teacher and had the kid tell him the answer too. Teaching grade 5. Students were fooling around during group work, so I said sarcastically, do I need to stand here and watch you do your work? To which the student responded even more sarcastically,
well, you don't have to stand, you can grab the chair and sit.
I can't remember which grade it was, but probably the 2nd or 3rd grade. Teacher was asking something relatively simple and no one wanted to or knew the answer. What's going on here? There should be hands up like trees in the forest.
Maybe this is a logging area,
said the joker of our class. I had this pretty attractive history teacher. She was talking about jewels or something at a museum, and I blurted out,
Mrs. Smith, I can show you some real nice jewels.
And everyone bust out laughing, and the teacher got very red and flustered and embarrassed, and I looked confused because I meant I would show her big diamonds and rubies to jokingly woo her, but the class and the teacher took it as I was referencing my nether regions. I was teaching kindergarteners about needs versus wants, and I showed pictures of things and we talked about why it was or wasn't. After a picture of a puppy came up, everyone but one kid said want, so I asked him to explain his answer. He just says,
But what if you're blind?
Good answer, you win, kid. I once drew a woolly mammoth picture because I couldn't remember the name of it for a quiz question in science class. I got the point for it. I worked in a special needs class for a year, and there was one kid with a textbook case of Asperger syndrome. Very bright, very tough nut to crack. I tried to tell him a corny joke once, and he was not having it. Why did the chicken cross the road?
He likely had business over there or was compelled by force.
Well, okay. Easily my favorite memory of that class. My friend's also on the spectrum. It's led to similar punchlines to classic corny jokes. Why don't people play poker in the jungle?
Because the undiscovered tribes who inhabit the jungle have had no contact with Western culture. Therefore, they would never have heard of any game called poker, let alone know how to play it.
Trying to delicately explain to a 3-year-old why she should be kind to her mum. You shouldn't say those things to mummy when she's sick. Who looks after you when you're sick and makes you feel better?
The doctor.
Well, frick. I gave a group of 2nd graders a worksheet about main idea and detail. In the instructions, they were told to circle the main idea and underline the details. One child returned the paper to me very promptly, having underlined the phrase, the main idea, and having circled the details in the instructions. She knew exactly what she was doing when she turned it in. She was a clever one. She did just fine when I asked her to complete the assignment as expected. I said, the quiz tomorrow will be on, and my student shouted, paper! Everyone laughed and I rephrased the question. One of my kids couldn't remember what country wasn't a part of the UK on a test, so she put Mexico. I teach English in Japan. When teaching my students, I asked, what do we say when someone is being too loud? And one smartass yells, shut up forever! I've never said this, no clue where he learned it either. I nearly lost my crap, but he wasn't wrong. The correct answer is, be quiet please, which I told him was more polite. He just grinned as if he knew, but didn't care. Smart kid, I'll miss him when I change jobs.
I get this pretty often from my students. My favorite is when I say, please be quiet to new students and they ask their friends what I said. Usually someone will come back with, shut up. I teach and coach baseball. After our short stop got thrown out on the 2nd for the 3rd out, I told someone to pick up Will, in baseball terms meaning get his glove and hat so he can go out to the field. This kid who was new to baseball, a big lineman type of football player, claps his hands and goes to the shortstop. It's okay, Will, you'll get him next time. I cried laughing. Poor William. Well, at least he didn't get hauled over the lineman's shoulder and carried off the pitch. I'm a teacher, but my best answer to this is in high school. An English teacher was asking about the poetic reasoning behind why the moon is always used in a feminine context. Guy behind me says, because they're both on a 28-day cycle? When I used to teach anatomy, Anthony, name this bone.
Femur.
Is it a left femur or a right femur?
Yeah. My godfather is a lobster fisherman, and all of the kids in the family would go out on the boat with him from time to time. There was a running joke with my uncle, dad, and godfather. They would get a kid to bait a trap, then applaud them for being a master baiter. My cousin went back to school after summer vacation, and when the teacher asked what she did that summer, she proudly stated, I became a… well, you get the picture. Not a teacher, but just a witness to this hilarity. In science class in high school, our teacher was talking about electricity and lightning and the effects of being shocked. He asked if anyone happens to know what is the first sense you lose when struck by lightning. Without missing a beat, a girl put her hand up and answered, in all honesty, your sense of humor? The class had to stop for a few minutes until everyone could regain their composure. This one kid twice on the same quiz. First question, describe the bus ride at the beginning of the chapter.
It was a bus ride filled with action, but also with emotion.
Second question, what happens at the end of the story?
The story ends.
That kid is going to be a politician someday. My wife is an elementary school teacher. The kids were practicing their 2 times tables, and the question said something along the lines of, John lives in his house with his mum, dad, brother, and grandpa. How many total hands do the people in John's house have altogether? The answer they were looking for was 10, and they wanted the students to show that 2 times 5 equals 10. This young man instead wrote, not enough information, what if someone lost a hand? He wasn't wrong. My wife just wrote good thinking on his assignment and gave him full credit. The kid was bright and knew his times tables, so that wasn't an issue. She also had his older brother as a student and said they were both smart, but jokesters. My wife now teaches kindergarten, this was when she taught 3rd grade, and said she misses the funny responses on tests. She used to have a full Word document of the funniest answers. There was a buddy of mine in college, Jay, who was legendary for his witty responses in class. We were training to be RAs, and the residential life person asked, what are some things that, as an RA, you shouldn't do in your dorm room? People were saying stuff like drinking, etc. Jay raises his hand and says, practicing medicine without a license. The trainer was like, yeah, that's true. The same guy was in a film class. The teacher asks, what technique defined the scene we just watched? Jay raised his hand, gets called on and says, long, awkward silences. Teacher, could you give an example? Jay then proceeded to look awkwardly at the teacher, opening his mouth to say something periodically for 20 seconds. I co-teach a class and do a lot of the grading. Kids will write, I love teacher A, and I'm like, ha, this is teacher B, nice try, losers. Not especially funny, but I've thought about it for a long time afterwards. I was substituting for an elementary ESL class. There was one young boy from Africa. We asked the kids in the class what 3 wishes they would like if they could have anything. This young man said, 1. New shoes for my mother. 2. School all year. 3. Roast chicken for dinner. Most of the other wishes had to do with toys or candy. This kid was focused. We had a quiz about the 1960s in what I think was either my sophomore or junior year. One of the questions was, John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy were the first brothers to do, and we had to fill in the blank. We were doing a peer edit of the quiz the next day with another class's quiz. When my teacher got to the JFK and RFK question, someone raised their hand and said, my guy wrote down JFK and RFK were the first 2 brothers to do Marilyn Monroe. Mr. Q's reply was, technically that is kind of correct, but dock a point off anyway because the real answer is run for president. In conclusion, the Kennedy brothers' claim to fame isn't running for office, it was doing Marilyn Monroe. I was in a special ed room where the children were sorting nouns. The picture of the mailman went in the people column, the baseball went in the things column, and so on. There were several pictures of animals, and a little girl, who wore shorts with puppies and horses on them almost daily, sorted the animals in the people column and was the only one in class to have done so. I pulled her aside to ask why she didn't sort the animals in the things column. I didn't tell her she was wrong, I just wanted to see her train of thought. And she started giggling and burst out laughing, saying, how is an animal like a thing? Animals are alive. Cows can't be like a desk. And she's cracking up because she thinks it's so silly that people view animals as things. I asked her if someone taught her that or if she just knew it, and she said it was just something she knows. It was touching and innocent and very sweet. I love animal lovers. What celebrity behaved like a complete jerk to you in public? Wayne Brady screamed at my sister for taking his picture in Vegas. She wasn't taking his picture, he just walked into the shot. He freaked out, screaming that he wanted her to show him that she was deleting it. She was trying to explain that she didn't even know he was there, and showed him the picture that only had a sliver of him in it when she looked through the shots. He continued to berate her about not respecting his privacy in the middle of the Vegas Strip. She was in tears, apologizing for doing nothing wrong, and he never acknowledged he was in the wrong and continued to badmouth her as he stormed away. Can't watch him anymore. Mark Wahlberg did an appearance at his brother's restaurant. He refused to take pictures with anyone taller than him. Now, this I can believe. Met Tiger Woods when I was 15. He slapped my hat out of my hand. A different golfer whom I didn't know ran up, picked up my hat, and asked if his signature would be okay. I agreed, but I don't know who he was or what his name was, but my grandpa was pleased upon seeing it. Pauly Shore. It was mid-90s in New York City, and my wife and I were at a very popular Asian restaurant with a huge wait time. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. He tried to play the "don't you know who I am" card. Hostess was having none of it, said, "Don't know, don't care, you'll wait." They left in a huff. I know this won't come as a surprise, but Steven Seagal used to frequent a restaurant I worked at. Guy was a colossal piece of crap. He treated his wonderful family like crap, and it was obvious he was cheating on his wonderful wife with the Asian nanny. This fricking moron would come into a 10-table restaurant, all 6'5" and 300 pounds of him, wearing a golden kimono in the South, and would wonder why people were looking at him. So he made us take the entry partition down and put it around his table. He was an absolute trash human being. Also met Peyton Manning one night after the Super Bowl he lost to the Saints. This was at an ultra-high-end golf course, and we were not allowed to act like we recognized celebrities, which was more awkward than anything. Anyway, he walked up and ordered a beer and introduced himself, but I was already turning to get the beer as he stuck out his hand to shake my hand and tell me who he was. As if I didn't know who Peyton Manning was in the grounds when I saw his forehead pull into the parking lot. So I blew off Peyton Manning for a handshake. How many of you losers can say that? Great frickin' guy, though. Well, the narrator thought that maybe the author was drawing too many conclusions about Steven Seagal, but after a quick Google I can see that he is, if anything, painting him as less of a D-bag than the man himself often behaved as in public. Didn't happen to me, but I had a physics teacher in high school who sat next to Bill Nye on a plane once. Apparently, he was super unpleasant to be around. Every time this thread comes up, James Corden ends up taking it over. "Hey James, you won't remember me, but me and my friends sat at a table next to you and Harry Styles and some others in Manchurian Legends in London's Chinatown about 6 years ago. We didn't bother you, but you were a massively entitled C-word who yelled and treated the waitstaff like crap. And when one of my party politely suggested you calm down, you got really aggressive and threatening, in a chubby way like a boozy panda. So my question is this: why did Harry seem so cool while you were such a massive, throbbing eggplant?" This is from his AMA thread, by the way, literally hundreds of posts like this from ex-fans, staff, and other actors. I haven't met a rude celebrity yet, but Stanley's security at Calgary Comic Con a few years back was fricking brutal. The guy acted like he was a fricking mercenary. Stan Lee would sit in a chair and you'd come close to him to get your photo op, and Stan let me be pretty well arm-to-arm close, and his security guard yelled at me and asked Stan if he authorized me to be that close. Even the photographer looked at the security guy like he was crazy. But at the same Comic-Con, meeting Norman Reedus, Stephen Yeun, and Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, was amazing. They're all super awesome and tried to have a legitimate conversation with you. Steve Yeun even complimented my glasses. 10 out of 10, best con for me. I was the butthole in my store. I saw Don Cheadle at an airport and was thinking about Ocean's 11 and said to my friend, "Dude, it's Bernie Mac." And he looked back and said, "Nah, I'm the other black guy from Ocean's 11, but at least you liked the movie." Jared Leto hit on my girlfriend at the time and called me fat. His brother Shannon was super nice though. At least he didn't tattoo fat on your forehead. He was a total rude, aloof jerk, and his brother was super lovely, warm, and sweet. Jimmy Fallon. I liked his show, and one day while I was getting a tour at NBC Studios, he bumped into me and turned around and said sorry, and then flipped me off, and it's not like I got in his way. He walked into me from behind. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta, and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross or Arrested Development type stuff, so my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it, and she told us she was his sister. So for months, we'd chat her up anytime we ordered food from her truck, and eventually David was in town. She invites us to come to the food truck to meet him, so we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. No, it's okay, I'll introduce you. She does, and he was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Our best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He was a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come on by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he insisted, then asked if he wanted pictures, and was super cool. I'll say on behalf of Cross that I listened to him on Andy Richter's 3 Questions, and he says he feels bad about being a jerk to his fans when he was younger. He admits actively being a jerk, but he also said he didn't really know how to talk to people at all. He said he'd get weird when people complimented him or said they liked something. I thought it was kinda good of him to admit he'd been a jerk in the past, instead of continuing to be a jerk and just thinking his fans are buttholes. Kurt Vonnegut. I had to get in touch with him frequently for work at a non-profit for several years. He was never once even vaguely polite. I tried to bum a cigarette off Kurt Vonnegut once, when he was guest professor at my old college. Before I could even say a word, he looked up and fricking growled at me. So naturally, I panicked and fled. At the end of the year, the school paper did an interview with him and he was like, "For some reason, hardly anyone came to my office hours." Yeah, Kurt, it's because you growl at people. Bobby Flay. We paid hundreds of dollars to go to a fancy event he was participating in. Waited for a long time just to meet him and say hi, and he looked at us and walked away. He was a real jerk about it too. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was on a field trip in middle school and our teacher saw him. She politely asked if he could say something to us or just say hi. We always watched him in science class. He told her to F off and basically berated her for bothering him and asking him to speak to a bunch of kids. I'm not sure if he was just having a bad day, but it was not the best experience as a child. Some narrator's insights halfway through the script. Bill Nye's name came up a lot in this story grouping, which may be upsetting to some people, but there it is. Apparently, just don't talk to him if you see him in public. I won't do any more of his stories unless they're particularly juicy. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect, it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" And Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Don't freaking say that. Don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us, not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside the building, saying, "Don't look over here. Turn around and eat your food. F off." He sounded genuinely furious at us, almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everyone knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people, but at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically attack her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph because apparently Tina felt bad, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about New York's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of that time. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice, Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre because he caught her right after her performance and she was tired, but Kenny Chesney puts the D in D-bag. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, t-shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the studio with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cop said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave. So that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years, other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters with Kenny. I've had the perfect combination of bad star, good star. It was at DragonCon, maybe 2005. I'm going through the big autograph room waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it. Maybe he was having a bad day. Next to Mr. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster, V, among other things. Mr. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. Mr. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment, just started helping. That's when I decided if I ever became famous, I was going to try and be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I sat next to Rosario Dawson on a flight from LA to Austin while she was shooting Death Proof. I didn't recognize her and she kept trying to strike up conversations while I was studying for a Cal 2 final. I was a butthole to her until it came out that she was Rosario Dawson. Then we had a very pleasant conversation. I regret meeting her because I am the jerk. Prince Andrew. Spent a lot of time around him 10 years ago, working at private school events he attended. The guy was a total prick. Maybe he would have been nicer to you if you were younger. I met Shane Dawson at a restaurant I used to work at. He used to come in a few times a year with his fiancée and in-laws. He's a prick. None of my servers liked him or wanted to serve his family, and I damn near had to fight some little girls off the property because they wouldn't leave without seeing him. I sat near him at Denny's in Santa Monica around midnight once. Must have been back when he had longer hair, and I don't think he was dating Ryland yet, but I'd already stopped watching years prior. He was alone with his laptop, didn't even realize until my boyfriend pointed him out, so I looked behind and indeed it was Shanae. Can't remember a single time he thanked our server, although while we were there she was just refilling his coffee. Apparently some people don't feel the need to thank their servers every single time they visit their table. Afterwards I realized he'd been live tweeting about the other couple a few booths down from us who were seated closer to him. We narrowly avoided him talking crap about us to thousands of people. My gosh. Met Dennis Leary. Butthole. Figures. Mike Rowe was super cool though. Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World. Years ago during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all bugged that I asked for a photo, even though that's what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I was crimping his style just by showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day, I got a ball signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll, TV, movie memorabilia convention in the mid-90s, shortly before the Kiss reunion, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He didn't talk to fans, didn't say hi, heck, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him, and you were hustled away afterwards. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table and he was totally cool guy. Shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted, posed for pictures, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's surly, hungover D-bag act. A famous soap opera star in my country, he came into the Dairy Queen I was working at. I didn't know who he was and my co-worker started hyperventilating and went into the back. The guy was rude and when I handed him his cone he said, "Is that all?" Like he expected extra because he was famous. Yeah dude, if you order one scoop, you get one scoop. Didn't find out he was famous until he left and my co-worker came back to the front. "Sir, this is a Dairy Queen, not a drama queen." I've forgiven this particular author for not giving us a name purely on the basis of that clapback added by the subsequent comment. Thank you, oh sassy one. Diana Ross. I worked in a health club in a hotel across the street from a stadium when I was young. She came in, looked at the pool, which was a really decent lap pool, and said, "My bathtub is bigger than this." I replied, "Go back to your bathtub then." She wanted me fired instantly. HR told me to go home for 2 days because if they fired everyone she wanted fired, the hotel wouldn't have any staff. I met James Brown back in the 80s when I lived in Vale. The man was dissatisfied with everything and generally drunk. Absolute flip side was meeting Mr. Rogers when I was at Pitt. That man was the real deal. I wouldn't say disappointing as I was never eager to meet him, but Drake. Drake was just unprofessional and egotistical when I worked with him both times. This was before he got big, first award show type level. He's told me to F off directly and I watched his mum calm him down from a tantrum. My fiancé is a chef at a pretty prominent boutique hotel restaurant in Philly. He says the 2 worst guests were Ariana Grande, made not 1 but 2 servers cry, and the Rolling Stones. The best guests were Sylvester Stallone, Pink, Lady Gaga, and Guy Fieri. Anyone from Pittsburgh can tell you that Ben Roethlisberger is a horrible person. I have a friend who owns a bar on the south side and he has, on multiple occasions, just walked into the bar and said, "My friends and I are drinking for free tonight." He also told Arnold Palmer's grandson that he doesn't sign autographs if he's not getting paid to do so. Legend has it that he earned a pretty nasty verbal beatdown from Palmer and apparently he's banned from his golf course. Arnold Palmer, on the other hand, was an incredibly nice guy. Bill Cosby, even before all his real horrible stuff got publicly known. He came to a restaurant in DC where I was a hostess. I came to get him for his table and he said,
"Do you not need a college degree for this job?"
No man, have you never met a server before?" I was sitting undressed in a Korean day spa steam room when a guy who looked just like Lawrence Fishburne walked in and sat down across from me. I was there with 2 friends and we were talking and you could tell we were all like, could that really be Morpheus? We just kept talking and he was listening to whatever story we were reminiscing about, and then he smiled at something we said and we saw the tooth gap. We all played it cool though and didn't say anything until after he left. 10 out of 10, a nice guy to hang out undressed with. The lead singer of Smash Mouth showed me a picture of him sticking a beer bottle into a Brazilian woman. Ruined Astro Lounge for me. I met Wayne Gretzky once. Guy's a bit of a chode, to be honest. I caught him on a bad day. We all get like that. His father, rest in peace, was so much cooler than he was. On the flip side, my brother met Gord Downey, also rest in peace, at a get-together. He was with his girlfriend and her family at one of her parents' friends' place. They were all sitting, chatting, having a good time. Out of nowhere, Gord walks in like it's nothing. Apparently the owners of the house were friends with Gord. My brother, being a huge Tragically Hip fan, was internally freaking out, but he kept cool on the outside so as to not bother this guy. He talked with him for a while about sports and things like that. Towards the end of the night when my brother was getting ready to leave, Gord stopped him and shook his hand while saying, "Thank you for pretending not to know who I am." Deion Sanders. I interviewed him at an NFL military event like 8 or 9 years ago, and he was a prick the whole time. He threw my lav mic on the ground when he was done instead of placing it in my outstretched hand. I was also active duty military at the time, and the event was on a ship. Hey Sanders, if you hear this, F you, dude. F you.
Yeah, but he was also capable of being a jerk and throwing mics to the ground at MLB events. You gotta respect that kind of versatility.
This guy expected my seat on a plane. He was our local news anchor. Actually said, "I may look familiar." I said, "You're a merchant banker?" Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at Burger King around 2002 to 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like, "Hey, hey, hey!" at us. I didn't really recognize him, but he asked if we knew who he was. I said no, but my coworker said yes. Then he looked at me like, "You don't know?" and was just really confused. My coworker said it was Justin Timberlake and he said, "Yeah, hello, come on man." Then he just sort of had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was. But here's the thing. The entire time he's leaning all the way over the driver who was clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked if I was from the Middle East and I said no. He clearly didn't listen and said, "Yeah, that sucks. Sorry about the whole Afghanistan thing." He asked if we wanted his autograph. We said sure. He wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience, and I try not to let it influence my view of him because he was clearly on something, but he just came off like a big goofy attention-loving silly Billy the entire time. Met Morgan Freeman at a Bed Bath & Beyond. He was shopping for a teapot on a lower shelf and stood up right when I almost walked into him, and I was like, "Wow, you look just like Morgan Freeman." And he said without skipping a beat, "If I was Morgan Freeman, wouldn't I be in Hollywood or something?" And the voice made me now like 99.9% certain it was him. And I was like, "I guess you would. Enjoy your time here." I don't regret meeting him, and I don't think he was being a jerk. I just thought it was so Morgan Freeman of him to have a line like that to make you wonder if you met Morgan Freeman or just a guy that likes to act like a character in a bunch of his movies. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.